I'm Ben Brown, live at Buckingham Palace, where mourners continue to lay floral tributes to the late Queen Elizabeth. The queue to see the Queen lying in state grows, with warnings that there are now wait times of at least 24 hours.
And I'm Karen Giannone, live at Westminster as people continue to file past to see the Queen lying in state. I'll be speaking to some of them.
Rehearsals for the state funeral procession at Windsor have been taking place, with some of the precise details overseen by the late Queen Elizabeth before her death.
And I'm Jane Hill in the rest of the day's news. Ukraine's president says investigations into possible Russian war crimes continue in the northeastern city of Izium, as more than 400 bodies are being exhumed from a burial site. And at least 10 people have been killed in Italy after heavy rain and flooding hits the central region of Marche.
Hello and welcome from Buckingham Palace, where it is a glorious autumnal day. Bright sunshine, blue skies, and behind me, people still laying floral tributes to the late Queen Elizabeth. And world leaders will begin gathering here in London from today for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth on Monday. Members of the public are still queuing in their thousands to view her coffin at Westminster Hall. Now, the wait time reached at one stage 25 hours during the night. People are being advised now not to travel to join the queue. Meanwhile, a man has been arrested following a disturbance in Westminster Hall. That was around 10 o'clock last night. It's reported he rushed towards the late Queen's coffin before being taken into custody. Well, the Queen's grandchildren will stand guard around her coffin later on today. Yesterday, the King, the Duke of York, the Princess Royal and the Earl of Wessex held their own vigil in Westminster Hall. Let's bring you this report now from Dan Johnson.
The sound that signals the change of watch called forward the four people who know best the Queen's life and character. Her children, Charles, Anne, Edward and Andrew. All of them in uniform, taking their place in silent vigil, lasting almost 15 minutes.
Surreal, absolutely surreal. Loads of respect. Just so glad we waited 12 hours just for that 2-3 minutes. Amazing.
And it wasn't just the Queen's coffin, you got to see.
We did. How humbling is that?
You got to see the whole family. It was incredible, absolutely amazing.
No, it was a very emotional moment, and that just added to the whole afternoon, evening. Unbelievable.
She's the only female we've ever had and will ever have on our planet that is known by everybody in the world, from the smallest island to the largest area on our planet. No, she's just the only one, our Queen. And that to me fills me with, just immense pride.
Meanwhile, the queue kept snaking through the night.
Everybody's remarked on how well organised things have been and what a nice, positive, friendly attitude there is amongst the crowd. The temperature is dropping and the wait times are now up as much as 24 hours, but I don't get the sense anybody is going to be giving up.
The day started with a visit to Wales, the last piece of our national jigsaw for the new King's tour. His first time here as monarch, though as Prince of Wales for so long, he's closely associated with this land and its people. While the majority cheered, there were some jeers. But the King is acutely aware of the distinct identity here, including the Welsh language.
Through all the years of her reign, the land of Wales could not have been closer to my mother's heart. Roedd lle arbennig I Gymru yn ei chalon.
The new Prince and Princess of Wales were meeting New Zealand troops and others from the Commonwealth who will be taking part in Monday's state funeral. The military's busy making sure everyone is in step. Around 4,000 armed forces personnel will be involved.
She's been the integral part of the armed forces, the glue between the tri-services, and for me just to pay my one small little bit of respect by doing this duty, I can't measure how prideful I feel about that, and how humbled to have the opportunity to do that.
Last night, a man was arrested in Westminster Hall after a disturbance a couple of hours after the royals left. There are reports he ran forward and touched the Queen's coffin. This has been a place of quiet calm and focused thoughts from so many who've stepped up on behalf of their country in bad times or in good. David Beckham queued for 12 hours and he picked up on the sense of generational change felt by so many here.
I grew up in a family that were all royalists. You know, I think back to my grandparents, because if my grandparents were alive, they would have been here. So it's nice to be here to celebrate with everybody, you know, the life of Her Majesty and the legacy that she's left.
The King's vigil lasted just a few solemn minutes. A new monarch watching over the old, a son's silent tribute. And this evening, the Queen's grandchildren will take their turn here, standing guard in protection and in mourning. Dan Johnson, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, rehearsals have been underway under the cover of night ahead of the Queen's funeral on Monday. Let's just bring you some pictures then of military representatives rehearsing outside Windsor Castle. The Queen's coffin will be taken there after Monday's funeral at Westminster Abbey, and it will then be laid in the Royal Vault at Windsor beside the Queen's late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, who died last year in April of 2021. Well, at Windsor Barracks, the armed forces participating in the procession on Monday, rehearsing for the first time as one.
Particularly on this occasion, everyone wants to do their level best to give the Queen the most fitting, appropriate send-off that we can. And there's a real vibe round camp at the moment. People really puffing out their chests, wanting to do their level best for the Queen. So for her final send-off, we will be looking our absolute sharpest.
Well, not just people in the United Kingdom mourning Queen Elizabeth, people all around the world. And today a memorial is taking place in Kenya at a church that the then Princess Elizabeth visited just a few days before she became Queen. A few days after that, her father, King George VI, died and she came to the British throne. Well, Anne Soy, our senior Africa correspondent, is outside the church in Naramoru and joins us now. Anne.
Yes, Ben, as you can imagine, the people here feel a special connection to the Queen because of that history. And the service has just ended, a beautiful service, and they were reflecting on her life of service. They were also reflecting on her sense of humor and, you know, just mentioning that grand entry into the games in London a few years ago. And there were smiles when they were reflecting on that. None of these people would have been here in 1952. We were hoping one member who's still alive came here, but sadly he didn't make it to come. But many of them feel a special connection to the Queen, partly because of this church where the Queen attended as a princess, and just a few days later, as you say, she became Queen. And so this church was filled to capacity, and that tells you something about what this means for the local community here in Naramoru on the foothills of Mount Kenya.
And thank you very much indeed. That's Anne Soy there for us. Well, as I was saying, people laying floral tributes here at Buckingham Palace in memory of the Queen, but the focus of attention very much still at Westminster Hall. Let's cross over to my colleague Karin Giannoni, who's there at Westminster for us. And Karin, these queue times are extraordinary, but still people are coming.
Yes, they are extraordinary, Ben, because they were over 24 hours expected queue time at the beginning of today. It was still dark. People were coming through from their overnight queue, emerging after about 12 hours. But entrance access to the queue was stopped, and people were being urged not to travel, not to come to London to join the queue at Southwark Park, because the wait time was over 24 hours, the estimated wait time, and the queue was at near total capacity. However, things have eased slightly since then. The latest update on the live YouTube feed that the government has put in place says that the queue is in Southwark Park. The waiting time is currently an estimated 16 hours. That is 5 miles away from here. It's the very limits of the queue's capacity at 8 kilometres, and people are joining that at Southwark Park. But Southwark Park itself at various points in the last 24 hours has been closed because so many people have been coming down. And what you're looking at now is very, very close to where we are. It's the snake that it's been called since it started, where people are concentrated into such a small area. They're very, very close to the Palace of Westminster, to Westminster Hall, to getting in. But when they get to this point, they've been queuing now for, 12 hours. And then they're condensed, and it's another hour or two to get through this tight-knit formation before they get to security, and before another half an hour or so they get into Westminster Hall itself. But I've just been speaking to people in the queue. The first phenomenon I've seen of somebody who's doing it for the second time. A man has just come through, and he said he'd been in the queue for more than 12 hours overnight last night, but he did it in 8 hours yesterday, and he liked it so much. It was such a rewarding experience for him that he has gone through it all over again, and he's made friends with the people that he's stood with hour after hour through the night. And it's been really cold. The sun is up now, as you can see. That is a welcome relief. It has been really cold, very autumnal overnight. Now, 5 miles away from here, the beginning of the queue, Southwark Park, which has seen people turning up and not being able to join the queue over the last 24 hours, seems to be open again. Let's talk to my colleague Lauren Moss. Lauren, what is the situation there? Are people able to start queuing?
Thank you. Yes, they are actually. You might be able to see behind me the slow, steady stream of people making their way through the railings. So again, sort of designed in that sort of snake-like zigzag shape to sort of stem the flow of people coming into Southwark Park, around 5 miles away from Westminster. And this is the start of the queue, or the end of the queue. And in a sense, this is where people are joining it from. And after they've come here and collected their wristbands, which will have a certain number on, they then cross the road, directed across the road, and they head down the Thames path towards Bermondsey, and snake their way up again past the houses and warehouses there towards Tower Bridge, edging closer to Westminster. And I've been down here since around 5 o'clock this morning, and it's got steadily busier. There was that warning overnight, that advice urging people not to travel to London because the queue time was so long. That advice has adapted in the last few hours, and now the government is saying that if this park reaches capacity like it did yesterday, then the queue will be paused. But at the minute, anyone entering the queue now faces around a 16-hour wait until they make it to Westminster Hall. And I've been speaking to people since the early hours of this morning who've travelled from various places around the UK. A lady from East Yorkshire who went to the theatre last night and then got in her car and drove straight here, and hasn't had any sleep, and probably won't have any until the early hours of tomorrow morning. A father and his daughter, so some people that have travelled from Belgium, and families as well making the journey together. Because what's really struck me with the people I've been speaking to is that the personal connection that they feel with paying their respects to Her Majesty the Queen in Westminster Hall. They say that it makes them think about when they lost loved ones, and that's why they want to come here and pay their respects to her who served this country. And that's very much the feeling. But also, while it is a sombre feeling, as you know, we've been hearing over the last 3 days, there's quite a lot of camaraderie among everybody who is gathering here. They're making friends with strangers, they're sharing sharing snacks. Everyone's getting on really well with each other and making friends, and probably friends that they may well stay in touch with. And all the way along the line, there are stewards, there are plenty of police officers. Everyone is very friendly. There are coffee and tea stands set up. Everybody's sort of in this together. And somebody said to me, a man who's come over from Belgium, that he was very struck by the Britishness of it all, the queuing and the friendliness among everyone to take part in this historic event.
Yeah, Lauren, absolutely the same here. There is almost an excited atmosphere as people are around in this area because they are feeling that they can be part of this event. It means so much to them in so many ways for whatever individual reasons to be part of this among tens, hundreds of thousands of people potentially. Lots of people also just around here at Westminster going to Buckingham Palace and have flowers in their hands. They've travelled from all over the country and they've got bouquets of flowers and they're going to lay them at Buckingham Palace. Some people here are saying, we don't mind if we don't join the queue, but they've come from work, you know, over the weekend after they finished work on Friday and headed straight from London for London from all over the country. But it is a changing situation with the queue. Lauren, I don't know if you're still able to hear me, but I mean, do we know what happens if people get to Southwark Park and at that point the entrance to the queue is closed? Where do they go then? Because we had talk yesterday of a queue for the queue.
Yes, again, something that probably sounds very British as well. And I hear that there was a queue from the queue and another queue on the back of waiting to get into that queue. That is not the official advice, because I think what the situation is here for the organisers and the government is it's a balancing act, isn't it? They're very much aware of people travelling quite a long way to come here and to try and pay their respects, and they don't want people to be stuck in the queue and not be able to get through into Westminster Hall before 6:30 on Monday morning, and that's when the Queen will be lying in state until before the funeral takes place around 10:30, 11 o'clock on Monday. So while they want people as many people as possible to get through, they don't then want to have the situation that more people are turning up and they might have waited 10 hours only to be told on Monday morning that that's as far as they can go. And I think that's something that we'll be seeing over the next few days, and they're definitely sort of a couple of days, sorry, that's how they're sort of assessing this queuing system. I think, like, the park was closed this morning and now we're seeing it's opening and there is a very steady stream. Sometimes further down the queue it's a standstill for several minutes and then it will move quite quickly again. So they are really trying to move people along, but a very watchful eye of making sure that, you know, it doesn't get to that cut-off point and people joining another queue to get into the queue, because they want to make sure as many people can come through as possible without being turned away disappointed. So the queue open until 6:30 on Monday morning.
Yep. And the lying in state officially coming to an end then 6:30 a.m. Monday morning, the day of the funeral. Lauren, thank you very much. That's Lauren Moss, where the queue begins. Southwark Park, so many miles away from here to the east of London on the south bank of the River Thames, 5 miles, 8 kilometres away, but they are coming still to join the queue. The people behind me that you can see filing past, they're reporting it was about 14 hours. They joined at about 8 p.m. They're coming through there now. They then file round Westminster, Palace of Westminster, around the side where there is a big white tent where they go through airport-style security, about half an hour longer to get through there. They're having to give up all their food and drink. The food that is still in sealed packaging goes to the food bank. The rest is thrown away or recycled, but it is really now nearing their destination of getting inside Westminster Hall, and we've been talking to people coming out on the other side, and genuinely they are overwhelmed with emotion. The whole experience of being in there has been so meaningful for them in so many ways. A lot of people reporting that they felt quite nervous going in. It was such a massive sense of occasion as they entered Westminster Hall, as well as the architecture of the place itself just being beautiful and overwhelming. But all of them still continue to tell us that whatever time they have taken to get through the queue, to go along the south bank of the Thames, through the night, through the cold, it's been worthwhile. Ben, back to you at Buckingham Palace.
Karen, thank you. And yes, it is a real blessing, isn't it, that the weather is so beautiful today for all those people in the queue there. And many have come here, as you were just saying, Karen, to Buckingham Palace to lay floral tributes. I got the tube to Green Park this morning, and there were so many people on the underground with flowers to bring here to Buckingham Palace. And just to let you know that tomorrow there's going to be an extraordinary reception here at the Palace, hosted by King Charles and the Queen Consort, of world leaders who are here in London for Monday's funeral. There will be presidents, there'll be prime ministers, there'll be members of overseas royalty, about 30 members of overseas royalty. It's going to be an absolutely staggering gathering of heads of state and world leaders, President Biden, President Macron of France among them, all hosted by King Charles and other members, working members of the royal family on the eve of Queen Elizabeth's funeral. That's it from Buckingham Palace. Back to Jay now with a look at the rest of the day's news.
Ben, many thanks. Ben Brown at Buckingham Palace. More from Ben to come, of course. But right now we will take a look at some of today's other main stories. And Ukraine's President Zelensky has accused Russia of committing war crimes in territory recently retaken by his forces in the northeast of the country. Ukrainian officials say they've found more than 400 graves containing civilians and about 20 soldiers who are said to have had their hands bound. They were discovered in the city of Izium, which Russian forces captured in April. Ukraine says the bodies will be exhumed and sent for forensic examination. Izium is now among the areas back in Ukrainian hands, with its forces having made significant territorial gains since the start of the month. Although there is still heavy fighting in these areas shown in circles here. Our correspondent Orla Guerin sent this report from Izium, and to warn you, her report does contain distressing images.
Under the pine trees of Izium, a war crimes investigation. This burial site has more than 400 graves, now being exhumed. The earth starting to give up its secrets. But the prosecutor here already claiming that Russia is responsible for almost all of the dead. According to our data, almost everyone died because of Russian soldiers, says Alexander Filchakov. Some were killed, some were tortured, some were hit in Russian air and artillery strikes. He says the very first grave they opened contained the body of a civilian with a rope around his neck. This knife was recovered from the remains of a soldier. A senior official told us more than 20 troops were found in a single grave with signs of torture. Some had their hands bound. For those at the scene, it was hard to take. This is a distressing sight, but Ukraine is determined that the world should see it. Graves are being opened here one by one. It's only now, after the Russians have been pushed out, that the authorities can really investigate and can establish how many victims they left behind. They were buried here in makeshift graves, many marked only with a number. Among them, a 65-year-old called Ludmila, who was killed in March in heavy Russian shelling. Her husband Grigory tells me then he had to bury her in the yard. She was brought here in August. Now her remains will be disturbed again. She was beloved, he says. We had no children. God didn't give us that gift, but we were in love. Emergency service workers drained by their labours. We can't be sure what killed all of those buried here, but they expect to be digging at more sites like this in areas recently taken back from the Russians. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Izium.
At least 10 people have died in Italy after heavy rains and flooding hit the central region of Marche. Search operations are underway for a number of people who are still missing. About 40 centimetres of rain fell in 3 hours. That's 1/3 of the rainfall usually received in a year. The White House says it is deeply concerned by the death of a young Iranian woman who died after being arrested by Iran's morality police. President Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, described the incident as unforgivable. Mahsa Amini, who was 22, died after being detained in Tehran for allegedly violating the Islamic Republic's strict dress code for women. Here, the police watchdog, the IOPC, says it will investigate whether race was a factor in the fatal shooting of an unarmed black man in South London. Chris Kaba, who was 24, was killed after a police car chase in Streatham earlier this month. The firearms officer who shot him has been suspended from duty. Chris Kaba's family has accused the Met of racism. Now, heads of state and foreign dignitaries from around the world will attend the Queen's funeral on Monday, and they will be joined by a cowboy from California. Monty Roberts is famous for his non-violent horse training, a method that impressed the Queen and formed the basis of a decades-long friendship. The BBC's Reagan Morris met Monty at his ranch in California before he left for the UK.
Member of the Victorian Order, a knighthood. A cowboy from California gets a knighthood. Can you believe it? And this was given to me in her office, not outside with the top hat and tails and all that stuff. In her office, very personally. He loves to run like that. Her Majesty's in a meeting in Northern Ireland with the politicians there. And she won't be able to take your call. And I said, oh, well, that's okay. Just tell me when I should call back then. And then I heard, Monty, how are you? Your Majesty. They told me you couldn't take the call. No, she said, they probably told you I was in a meeting with important people. And your calls are more important to me than anything. So I came out of the meeting and took the call. I almost fell off the phone. I couldn't believe it. I've never been received by people like that in my life. There's letters in here and Christmas cards in here. Here's one from the military in England and the Central Intelligence Agency in the United States. The Queen up here with her family and her favorite group of horses. Prince Philip and the Queen here, and letters that were written, and to be sure, with some integrity, because she wrote this letter and she addressed the envelope too. But in order to save a bit of loose change, she wrote on the back of the stationery. I'm sorry for me, I'm sorry for the world, I'm sorry for the family. She was just a wonderful person that just shouldn't have died, ever. I know it has to happen, but I just loved her so much.
What a delightful story. Monty Roberts there at his ranch in California, one of the many, many people who will be heading to London, is heading to London for the Queen's funeral on Monday. Let's return to Buckingham Palace. Let's rejoin Ben. Over to you.
Yeah, Jane, and you can see some of the people who've come to London to pay their respects to the Queen here at Buckingham Palace. And it's a day of warm September sunshine as they lay their floral tributes outside the gates of the palace here in central London. And not too far away, the queue to see the late Queen lying in state is growing ever longer. At one stage, overnight, it reached a 25 hours wait, and now we are told it's at least 24 hours. So people are prepared to wait an extraordinarily long period of time to see the Queen lying in state in Westminster Hall and to pay their last respects. And tonight in Westminster Hall, the Queen's grandchildren will stand vigil at her coffin, including Prince William at the head of the coffin and Prince Harry at the foot of the coffin. Prince Harry will be able to wear royal uniform. He's had special dispensation as a gesture of respect to the late Queen Elizabeth to wear uniform. And we are being told that King Charles is going to arrive here shortly at Buckingham Palace, and You might be able to see some of the crowds behind me who are lining up behind the barricades, waiting for a glimpse of the King when he does arrive here. Meanwhile, let's just talk about how Queen Elizabeth always cherished memories of her upbringing in a close-knit and loving family, and she tried very hard. We have seen that in balancing the demands of the monarchy, and they were extraordinary demands, with the needs of her husband and her children and her family. Like all families, there were, as we know, sometimes tensions, but as our deputy royal correspondent Daniela Relf now reports, her devotion to her family was always a vital part of her life and her reign.
3 cheers from the crowd, and the Queen just taking in the scene, taking in the sight.
Surrounded by her family, Her Majesty the Queen, wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. Throughout her reign, she has juggled family commitments with the duties of her unique position.
We are inside the Abbey for the most solemn and dramatic pictures that have ever appeared on the screen.
The coronation that changed the course of her life.
The members of the royal family take their places. The Princesses Elizabeth and Margaret Rose.
She wasn't born to be queen, but when she was 10, her uncle Edward VIII abdicated.
The king is crowned.
Her beloved father was crowned George VI, and she became heir to the throne. The Royal Home Movie Collection gave us a glimpse inside family life. Her relationship with her parents was warm and loving. The king refused to send his daughters to safety in Canada during the war, so they could stay together as much as possible. In 1947, she was allowed to marry Prince Philip, a love match opposed by some senior palace aides.
These are the first newsreel pictures taken since his christening of Prince Charles, now 8 months old.
Prince Charles was born a year later, but her royal duties meant they were apart more than she would have liked.
A heavy program of official engagements prevents the Princess and the Duke from seeing their son as often as they wish. It is only on occasions like this that they can enjoy the happiness of parenthood.
At the age of just 27, she was crowned queen. And her role as monarch meant taking tough decisions felt by those closest to her. Prince Philip had to give up his career in the Navy, and then a constitutional crisis.
Upon Princess Margaret centres worldwide interest, and
her sister, Princess Margaret, had fallen in love with a divorced man, Peter Townsend. In law, the Queen's permission was required for them to marry. But with the Church of England and the Cabinet opposed, she had to ask Margaret to wait. Eventually, the romance petered out.
It has been nearly 5 months since the Queen was with her children, though she has kept close contact with them throughout her tour by radio telephone.
Becoming monarch meant more overseas travel, and the separations from her children grew longer. But again, in private, the home movies showed they could be just like any other family. No formality, no public display. Motherhood could take priority. And efforts were made to shield the royal children from too much publicity. This was her Christmas broadcast in 1958.
Some of you have written to say that you would like to see our children on television this afternoon. We value your interest in them, and I can assure you that we have thought about this a great deal before deciding against it. We would like our son and daughter to grow up as normally as possible, so that they will be able to serve you and the Commonwealth faithfully and well when they are old enough to do so.
But public interest was huge. As the family grew, cameras were let in to see how they lived. Although the Royal Yacht Britannia remained a place of escape, annual summer holidays with a trusted crew, a precious sanctuary.
And as they come to Her Majesty the Queen, they will turn. Prince of Wales will bow, Princess of Wales will curtsy.
But her children's marriages were not as successful as her own. 3 of them ended in divorce. And in the dreadful aftermath of Princess Diana's death, she faced the conflict of leading a nation in mourning while supporting her son and grandsons in private. It was a deeply unhappy and unsettling time for the Queen personally. Charles's marriage to Camilla Parker Bowles in 2005 highlighted that tricky balance of being mother and monarch. The Queen was at a ceremony to bless the marriage, but as head of the Church of England, she did not attend the actual wedding, as she had to uphold its teaching on divorce. In recent years, her family life has continued to provide challenges.
Careful what you wish for.
She helped Prince Harry promote his Invictus Games.
Oh, really?
By teasing President and Michelle Obama.
Boom.
But when her grandson and his wife left for America, as Queen, she had to deal with the fallout and remove his military patronages. She was forced to have Prince Andrew withdraw from public life after he settled a court case in America in which he was accused of sexual assault. But milestone birthdays or a jubilee were often moments.
Just going to interrupt that report because I think we can just see King Charles now arriving here at Buckingham Palace and the crowd's cheering. Another warm welcome for the new king in beautiful September sunshine, driving in his favourite royal vehicle there through the gates of Buckingham Palace. The crowds have been gathering for quite some time, actually, hoping for a glimpse of King Charles III, and they've been rewarded. They were standing there at the barricades for quite some time, waiting, having laid their floral tributes to the late Queen Elizabeth. So King Charles back at Buckingham Palace ahead of a very busy couple of days, of course, the state funeral on Monday, but tomorrow a huge reception of heads of state, prime ministers, presidents here in Buckingham Palace. But let's go live now to Windsor and join our correspondent there, Helena Wilkinson. And it's been busy there too, Helena, hasn't it? They've been rehearsing for Monday's funeral proceedings.
Yes, Ben, absolutely. And in terms of the people who are coming, we've been here all week, and it is absolutely extraordinary to see the number of people who are continuing to arrive. It's Saturday, of course, the weekend, the weekend before the Queen's funeral. So lots of people will want to be here, and I suspect we might see people trying to get a space right at the front of the barriers, because this is where, after the state funeral in central London, the Queen's state hearse will be brought. We'll just give you a sense of what we are seeing here. The position we're at the moment, behind us, Cambridge Gates. We're at the top of the Long Walk at Windsor Castle. Just have a look around us, a number of people bringing flowers here, laying them outside Cambridge Gates. But on Monday afternoon, if we show you the scene just down the Long Walk there, about a mile down, that is where we will see the Queen's state hearse being brought up slowly. There will be around 1,000 military personnel who will take part in that service. And as you mentioned, Ben, there was a rehearsal in the early hours of this morning. It was very quiet here, but the military personnel who will be taking part, they practiced this morning here, and of course they will be trying to get everything as perfect as possible, a major operation. What we saw this morning here during that rehearsal was the hearse which will be brought up the Long Walk. There was a practice of the Guard of Honour, and as the state hearse came up the Long Walk here, sailors, army, military personnel, they bowed their heads. I think on Monday it will be a particularly poignant moment as the Queen's state hearse makes that journey along the Long Walk, a final journey for the Queen before it enters the grounds of Windsor Castle. And we've been speaking to people who knew the Queen, who work for the Queen, and locals here, because it will be their opportunity on Monday to say goodbye.
Military Knights of Windsor were among the thousands who heard the message from Castle Hill.
This was the day the people of Windsor were formally told they had a new monarch.
To bless the Royal Princess Elizabeth II.
But the Queen's special relationship with this town began before she came to the throne.
In wishing you all good evening, I feel that I am speaking to friends and companions.
When she was 14, she made her first address from Windsor Castle to children during the Second World War.
These pictures at a national service at Windsor.
She was involved in other formal duties from a young age. But it was Windsor Great Park where she found freedom and where her love for the countryside grew. It was where she learnt to ride.
Her Majesty's left an amazing legacy across the park.
Paul Sedgwick is the Deputy Ranger of Windsor Great Park and knew the Queen well.
I think at that time there was great freedom to ride around on her horse or her pony, exploring the great expanses of the park, the ancient trees, the parkland.
In 1952, the Queen made her husband, Prince Philip, Park Ranger. Together, they helped protect and preserve the park.
The avenues of trees, the reintroduction of the red deer, expansion of the gardens, the formal gardens, that continues nearly 1,000 years of royal patronage at Windsor.
We know that the Queen loved Windsor Great Park. Tell us then what it was about these gardens that she loved so much.
We're in the Golden Jubilee Garden at the Savile Garden, which Her Majesty opened in July 2002. It's one of three main gardens at Windsor: the Valley Gardens, the Savile Garden and Frogmore Garden. Coming out of the gardens at Windsor was that during COVID, when Her Majesty was in residence at the castle, every Friday morning we would send a fresh bouquet of flowers from one of the three gardens to Windsor Castle for the Queen.
The Queen's legacy is all around the park, and in the town of Windsor too, her presence is felt. From the Windsor Lady's statue of Queen Elizabeth with her corgis to one of two Windsor Greys who draw carriages on state occasions, from the Queen's Walkway self-guided tour taking in the Windsor Guildhall and its magnificent portraits, to the books of condolence in the town's churches. At the King George VI Centre, opened by the Queen in 1958, they remember her last visit 5 years ago.
Royalty is, you know, is special to everybody throughout the world, and it's been a real honour to have lived here.
Yeah, so it was the Queen who made us come to Windsor, and we've been happy here so all these years, you know. So thank you, Queen.
Here they feel a sense of pride. Their pride is shared in and around this town. Sayonara Laxton is the former mayor of Windsor.
What did Windsor mean to the Queen, and how special was that connection with her?
The Queen was the pillar of Windsor. For the people of Windsor, there is nothing else but the Queen. She was the pillar of Windsor. She brought the community together. She brought us all together. We had a meaning. It was so special to have her, to be here in the borough with her. And where else more you would want to be in the world other than in this area?
Windsor will be the Queen's final resting place. On Monday, the world will watch as the State hearse makes its way along the long walk up to the castle. One final journey. For people who live in this town, it will be a deeply personal moment, saying goodbye to the Queen, who was their neighbour and part of their community. Helena Wilkinson, BBC News, Windsor. And Ben, as the Queen's State hearse is slowly brought along the long walk here, it will go through those gates, which will be open, of course, and you can see so many people there laying flowers. What you can't see at the moment is behind those gates, on either side, a carpet of flowers. Now, those flowers are the ones that the members of the public have left throughout the week, tens of thousands of them. And staff here have been, throughout the night, every night, have been taking the flowers from outside Cambridge Gate, very carefully laying them on the other side of Cambridge Gate. And it's fitting and a beautiful thing that they're doing, because that is where the Queen's State hearse will move through the carpet of flowers either side, as the State hearse is then
taken to St George's Chapel, where the committal service will take place on Monday afternoon. Ben.
Helena, thank you very much indeed for that. Here at Buckingham Palace, we just saw in the last few minutes King Charles arriving and is now there inside Buckingham Palace, preparing, no doubt, for Monday's state funeral, but also preparing for that meeting tomorrow where all the official guests who will be at the funeral will be hosted by King Charles and the Queen Consort at a reception. Presidents, prime ministers, heads of state, members of other royal families from around the world will be here at Buckingham Palace. Well, meanwhile, people heading to London have been told to prepare for unprecedented demand on public transport as thousands travel to the capital to pay their respects to the late Queen. Jane McCubbin has been to meet some of those making the trip to the capital.
This is an exodus.
OK, so have we all been to the toilet?
Gentlemen, last call for the 12:30 to London.
Hundreds of thousands of people are on the move, all heading to the capital, all with one purpose. In Sandbach service station on the M6, we go in search of those on a pilgrimage, and we find Leslie.
There's only 2,000 people going to the funeral, and you will be one of the 2,000.
I can't believe it. I've been invited. It's still in a bit of shock. So I was on my way back from IKEA on Sunday, and all of a sudden I get this call from the Cabinet Office in the car saying that in recognition of my recent award of MBE, because I haven't been invested yet, to go to an investiture, would I like to attend the funeral on the 19th? And I just can't believe it, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm absolutely blown away.
Hello.
In Rugby, the Richmond family have taken the kids out of school early to drive to London to lay flowers for the Queen.
You're ready to go, aren't you? This is our rainbow that we made, wasn't it, for the Queen? Yeah. You've got to hold on to that. Willow was quite affected by it. She is very taken with the Queen and her handbags and her dresses, and
you wanted the kids to
be a part of
this moment.
Yeah. So we made a rainbow, didn't you, of all her favourite things. So what have we got?
The crown.
And the crown and the teacups and her lovely Philip.
I'm happy and sad, and I'm excited to go and see the Queen.
I try not to cry. She was just the great nan of the nation, really. Early, I think.
Team Richmond, go, go, go!
Do a big wave. It's a long way to London.
While the Richmonds set off by car, ticket sales to London are up across the country. National Express say their London sales are up by 40% this week.
Have you brought any food?
I've got a bottle of water.
That's it?
Yeah.
Barbara from Salford is travelling alone, and she's travelling light.
How long are you planning on going for, Barbara?
As long as it takes.
But show us your bag.
This is all she's packed.
This is instead of a hotel room in London.
It is. And it's got I think I need to go and see her. I need to walk past. I've been crying for days. Never been to London before, so it's a new adventure. If it didn't make this journey, then I'd be always wondering in the back of my mind, I should have gone, I should have done it.
We have to today, anyway, nice.
To see the Queen?
Oh, lovely.
I need to do it, for me.
Last call for the 12:30, please.
Bye. Stay safe.
There will be grief, but for Barbara, the shared experience of heading to the capital promises more friendship and unity. And this is exactly what propels lifelong friends Catherine, Audrey, Janet and Larissa from Manchester to London.
We're going to see ABBA, and then straight from ABBA we're going to join the queues and pay our respects to the Queen.
I don't see it as a sad thing. I think just after COVID, everybody was very lonely, and suddenly this has happened. Everyone's coming together. To our Queen. Yeah. I see it as a celebration.
Well, here at Buckingham Palace, people have come together and they've been rewarded with a glimpse of the new king. In the last few minutes, he arrived back here at Buckingham Palace. And let's just bring you up to date with the queue for people who want to see the Queen lying in state in Westminster Hall. We are told on the government website that is now 16 hours, that queue. At one stage, it was 25 hours, the wait, an extraordinary length of time for people to wait, but that doesn't seem to have deterred people. Earlier on today, it was 24 hours. It's now 16 hours, and they are queuing in pretty warm sunshine, I have to say. And the weather's been relatively kind to them. It was chilly overnight, certainly, but it's warm today, and there's no sign of any rain, so that is good news. And let's just show you the scene then live in Westminster Hall as people file past the late Queen's coffin. And last night the Queen's children stood vigil at the coffin. Tonight, later on this evening, it will be the turn of the late Queen's grandchildren, and Prince William will stand vigil at the head of the coffin, and Prince Harry at the foot of the coffin. And Prince Harry, by the way, will be wearing military uniform. He's had special dispensation despite having stepped back as a working royal. The King has, it's understood, given him special dispensation as a final tribute to the late Queen to wear military uniform. That's the latest from Buckingham Palace. Back now to Jane in the studio.
Ben, thank you very much. More from Ben Brown at Buckingham Palace in the next little while, of course. Let's just turn our attentions to Scotland, because Scotland, in particular, Royal Balmoral, Royal Deeside, held a special significance for the Queen, as we've reflected a lot since Her Majesty's death. Having had the opportunity to pay their respects in person in Edinburgh with the lying in state there, you will remember 24 hours of lying in state at St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh. Well, now people across the country are preparing to bid their final farewell. Conor Gillies reports.
High in the hills above Balmoral, a lone piper's lament for a local. A solemn song for a much-missed monarch.
Which is a big part for the community and all that. We recently just played for a couple of weeks ago, 4 or 5 weeks ago and that, so it was really a great honour to do that. I think we would probably be the last band that we would have played for her.
Over the decades, the Queen spent many a day, many a summer here at her beloved Balmoral Castle. A place to relax, a place where it said she could leave her crown at the gates.
Morning.
And this, in 1969, captured in the community, filmed buying Prince Edward an ice cream with their own money.
How much is it? That's all I got.
Just as the Queen was always part of their lives here in Royal Deeside, they too are intertwined in this journey on her death. And while the ceremonial crescendo comes in London for the funeral on Monday, here a sober, silent, subtle moment is planned. No pomp, no ceremony, because after all, she, Elizabeth II, was seen here as one of their own.
Yes, it's a very special place in the village.
Striking the right tone, important for David, who's lived here since he was born.
This is a very personal occasion. Many people have said to me that it almost feels as though they've lost a member of their family. It's that close a connection. And I feel that they probably want to be at home, perhaps on Monday, with their own families, watching the footage of the funeral and maybe reminiscing. Having said that, Ballater is going to mark the moment of reflection on Sunday evening at 8 p.m, where there will be a moment's silence here outside the church. And hopefully the people in the village will have the opportunity to come and stand with us and remember the Queen at that very poignant moment.
Down the coast in the Aberdeenshire fishing village of Gourdon, a different take. At the pub, Johnny will be showing proceedings on the screens, a community event with a spread of food.
It is most definitely a wake. It's in no way can you term it as a celebration. People will be coming in. There won't be any music or anything on apart from that, which is accompanying, it's like the TV service. Yeah, it's a large wake, and yeah, we're just inviting the locals to come in and take part in this experience, because no one really in the last 70 years has experienced anything like this, so it's going to be something new for all of us.
We also had the Queen attend the cathedral on several occasions. She would attend often for national events.
Tales of times gone by here at what's thought to be Scotland's biggest cathedral.
We come to this significant pew in the cathedral, and in some senses it's more a throne than a pew, because this is where Her Majesty the Queen would sit.
This, the Queen and Prince Philip here a decade ago celebrating her Diamond Jubilee. And now this is a place planning its own special service before Her Majesty is laid to rest.
We were conscious of the fact that there were many things happening in many places, but we thought that it was important to have a period and a time of preparation. So on Sunday evening at 7 o'clock here in Glasgow Cathedral, we're going to have a service of preparation.
Back in Balmoral, the land she loved. The people here with a personal, unique royal perspective, a connection that will never fade in life or death. Conor Gillis, BBC News.
So many people will have different thoughts about Monday, different ways they may or may not want to look and follow everything throughout the day regarding the Queen's funeral. We will have full coverage, of course, here on BBC News, and we certainly have seen and are continuing to watch the enormous numbers of people still coming to the capital, joining that queue. About 2,000 people an hour are joining the queue, is the latest information we are given. The current waiting time to view and take part in the lying in state, we are told, 16 hours. And if you are wanting to queue, if you're able to get to the capital to do that, weather is very, very important to your decision, perhaps, as to whether to take part. Also, the weather is important wherever you are in the country. Let's get the roundup of all the latest forecast with Chris Fawkes.
Hello. Well, it has been a chilly start to the day, cold enough even for a few patches of frost, but otherwise lots of morning sunshine. That's how we started the day in Newcastle, Newry, Morn and Down. However, in Twickenham, one of our early morning weather watchers photographed this steam fog. That's where the warm, moist air from the lake mixes with surrounding cooler air to create this layer of fog just on the water's surface. Now, for most of you, it is going to be dry throughout the day today, but we do have some showers running in across northern Scotland and coming down our North Sea coast. So you could see one or two grazing North Yorkshire, the coastline of East Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, Norfolk and Suffolk, and the showers will continue on and off through the day in northern Scotland. It does turn a little bit cloudier for a time in the early part of the afternoon, but for many, we'll keep those spells of sunshine going all day. Temperatures after that chilly start around 14 to 18 degrees Celsius. And for the Queen's lying in state, it is going to be a dry day today. A bit more cloud, though, to come tomorrow, and there is a small chance of seeing an odd passing shower, particularly late afternoon or early evening time. Now, Saturday evening, Saturday night time, we'll see a few more showers coming and going across Scotland, perhaps a bit more cloud here, a few mist and fog patches, but otherwise clear spells. And another chilly night, temperatures getting into single figures in the towns and cities, but cold in the countryside. Temperatures low single figures to start the day on Sunday, so another chilly start. For many, though, it's another bright day on the cards with further spells of sunshine. A bit more cloud, though, for Scotland and northern England, where there'll be a few showers. And I think there's a greater chance of some showers coming down the North Sea to affect eastern England, so you might see some of those into East Anglia and South East England on and off through the day. Into next week, high pressure continues to affect the weather across England and Wales, but we will have some weather fronts and strengthening winds later in the week across the northwest of the UK. Monday's weather then, again there could be a few morning mist and fog patches. For most of you it's another dry day with some further spells of sunshine, but a bit more cloud around generally, and there's a greater chance of some showers for western Scotland, perhaps running as far south as Cumbria. Temperatures, given the cloudier skies, a little bit higher, 17 or 18 degrees Celsius or so. Still a lot of dry weather to come in the week ahead, but by Thursday, as the winds pick up across western areas, we'll start to see some rain arriving as well. Goodbye.
Hello, welcome to BBC News. I'm Ben Brown, live at Buckingham Palace, where mourners are continuing to lay floral tributes for the late Queen Elizabeth. The queue to see the Queen lying in state at Westminster Hall grows, with warnings there could be wait times of at least 24 hours. Rehearsals for the state funeral procession at Windsor have been taking place, with some of the precise details overseen by the monarch before her death.
And I'm Jane Hill. In the other day's news, Ukraine's president says investigations are underway into possible Russian war crimes in the northeastern city of Izium. More than 400 bodies are being exhumed from a burial site. At least 10 people have been killed in Italy after heavy rains and flooding hit the central region of Marche. And also this hour, India's Prime Minister releases 8 cheetahs into a national park, 70 years after the world's fastest land animal was declared extinct in the country.
Hello from Buckingham Palace, where is a beautiful day, a really glorious, autumn day, bright skies, blue skies, sunshine, and large numbers of people here at Buckingham Palace leaving floral tributes for the late Queen Elizabeth. And also they were rewarded with a glimpse of the new King, King Charles, as he arrived here at Buckingham Palace in the last few minutes. We saw his vehicle and a couple of other vehicles, part of the motorcade, coming into the palace, and quite a crowd behind the barricades with a big cheer for the King. Well, world leaders will begin gathering here in London from today for the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth on Monday. Now, members of the public are still queuing in their thousands to view her coffin in Westminster Hall. At one stage, the wait time reached 25 hours. That was during the night. People are being advised not to travel to join that queue. The last we heard, the queue time was about 16 hours. Well, meanwhile, a man has been arrested after a disturbance in Westminster Hall. That was around 10 o'clock last night. It's reported he rushed towards the late Queen's coffin before being taken into custody. Well, later on today, the Queen's grandchildren will stand guard around her coffin. Yesterday, the King, the Duke of York, the Princess Royal and the Earl of Wessex held their own vigil in Westminster Hall. Let's bring you this report now from our correspondent, Dan Johnson.
The sound that signals the change of watch called forward the 4 people who know best the Queen's life and character. Her children, Charles, Anne, Edward and Andrew. All of them in uniform, taking their place in silent vigil, lasting almost 15 minutes.
Surreal, absolutely surreal. Loads of respect. Just so glad we waited 12 hours just for that 2-3 minutes. Amazing.
And it wasn't just the Queen's coffin, you got to see...
We did. How humbling is that?
You got to see the whole family. It was incredible, absolutely amazing.
No, it was a very emotional moment, and that just added to the whole afternoon, evening. Unbelievable.
She's the only female we've ever had and will ever have on our planet that is known by everybody in the world, from the smallest island to the largest area on our planet. No, she's just the only one, our Queen. And that to me fills me with, just immense pride.
Meanwhile, the queue kept snaking through the night.
Everybody's remarked on how well organised things have been and what a nice, positive, friendly attitude there is amongst the crowd. The temperature is dropping and the wait times are now up as much as 24 hours, but I don't get the sense anybody is going to be giving up.
The day started with a visit to Wales, the last piece of our national jigsaw for the new King's tour. His first time here as monarch, though as Prince of Wales for so long, he's closely associated with this land and its people.
While the majority cheered, there were some jeers. But the King is acutely aware of the distinct identity here, including the Welsh language.
Through all the years of her reign, the land of Wales could not have been closer to my mother's heart. Roedd lle arbennig I Gymru yn uchelon.
The new Prince and Princess of Wales were meeting New Zealand troops and others from the Commonwealth who will be taking part in Monday's state funeral. The military's busy making sure everyone is in step. Around 4,000 armed forces personnel will be involved.
She's been the integral part of the armed forces, the glue between the tri-services, and for me just to pay my one small little bit of respect by doing this duty, I can't measure how prideful I feel about that, and how humbled to have the opportunity to do that.
Last night, a man was arrested in Westminster Hall after a disturbance a couple of hours after the royals left. There are reports he ran forward and touched the Queen's coffin. This has been a place of quiet calm and focused thoughts from so many who've stepped up on behalf of their country in bad times or in good. David Beckham queued for 12 hours, and he picked up on the sense of generational change felt by so many here.
I grew up in a family that were all royalists. You know, I think back to my grandparents, because if my grandparents were alive, they would have been here. So it's nice to be here to celebrate with everybody, you know, the life of Her Majesty and the legacy that she's left.
The King's vigil lasted just a few solemn minutes. A new monarch watching over the old, a son's silent tribute. And this evening, the Queen's grandchildren will take their turn here, standing guard in protection and in mourning. Dan Johnson, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, of course, people are continuing to pour through Westminster Hall to pay their final respects to the Queen lying in state. And in the last hour, Foreign Secretary James Cleverly and his wife have been among them. Immediately after the state funeral on Monday, he's going to be hosting a reception for guests at nearby Church House as members of the royal family head to Windsor for the Queen's burial. Well, we're hearing around 2,000 people an hour are currently joining the queue in Southwark Park. The wait at the moment, we are told, is 60 now, so it is down a little bit on the peak of 25 hours. Let's go to Lauren Moss, who's in Southwark Park at the very end of the queue. And Lauren, at least it's beautiful weather for people to queue in.
Hi Ben, yes it is now. I mean, this morning I've got to say, when I arrived here at 5 o'clock it was very chilly. It was a very chilly start for people joining the queue then, very chilly for those who'd been in the queue overnight as well. And like you say, we're being told that it's around a 16-hour wait now. I'm in Southwark Park, and the park, which you can't really get the full scale of how big it is, but it's divided into 4 zones. And when all of those zones are full to capacity, we're told that the queuing might be paused. So everyone is very much watching to see whether that's going to happen. And when I got my wristband this morning, when I joined the line, when I came in, I've now been speaking to other people, looked at their wristbands. There's around 20 to 30,000 people, I think, from working out rudimentary maths, that have passed through since I got here earlier today. And I've been having a chat to some of those in the queue. There are lots of families, people travelling far and wide from Yorkshire, from Coventry. I spoke to one man who'd come from Belgium. Lots of families and people, although feeling sombre and wanting to pay their respects to the Queen in Westminster Hall lying in state, are also, there's a feeling of joviality as well. They're making friends, they're sharing snacks, and making friends with each other. And I'm joined now by a family who've come over from Harlow. Just tell me your names again, sorry.
I'm Lucila.
And these are your children?
No,
I'm
this is my
Hayley.
daughter and her friend.
I'm a friend.
So you've come from Harlow today. Yes. Why was it so important for you to come and take part?
It's a history, we won't be able to see the Queen again. It will be the last time we will be able to be with her. So it's a part of history we can pass on to our children, to our generation, next generation. So that's why I'm here.
And we're told you could be facing up to a 16-hour wait. We're not sure. It might move faster than that. Sometimes it's moving quite quickly. Other times it pauses. You look very kitted out there. How are you prepared for the wait?
Well, it was really cold this morning, but we stayed for it, and yeah.
And you've got a backpack of supplies there.
Yeah.
What have you brought with you?
Food, drink, you know.
And James, what will it mean to you to get into Westminster Hall and see the Queen lying in state?
It's a rare opportunity, you know. Not many people can really get this, you know, chance to see the Queen, you know, finally resting after 96 years of her life and, you know, finally living her life to the fullest, and may her rest in peace.
Well, thank you very much. I'll let you go and rejoin your space in the queue. Thank you for speaking to me. And like I said, the wristbands that people are given when they arrive in the queue are numbered. So if people do step out to use one of the porta toilets that are scattered around the route, or they stop and get a coffee, they are able to re-enter the route. And I've spoken to people that have come from all over, not just to pay tribute and pay their respects, but people that are working here, police officers that have been drafted in from other forces, from Cornwall, for example, and up north, and stewards, some stewards that are working 14, 16-hour days just to do their part for this moment in history. And there's just quite a good feeling, a feeling of everybody coming together. There are coffee stalls set up, tea and coffee. Some of those are run by companies, others are just residents that are turning out along the route, along the Thames Path in Bermondsey, that have gone downstairs with a table and a large kettle and are giving people tea and coffee. So everything's still very much moving here this morning. Like I said, if the park does get full to capacity, Southwark Park, then the queue may be paused just to make sure that everybody can get through to Westminster Hall. We'll keep you posted.
All right, Lauren, yeah, it is very well organised, and it is interesting that people are not being deterred at all by the length of the wait. If you want to know, you can check out the government website, which is showing the length of the queue, and it's currently 16 hours, as you can see there, up to 16 hours. That is down, as Lauren was saying, from the high point of 25 hours, so a little bit quicker than it was. So lots of people there waiting to see the Queen lying in state. Lots of people here at Buckingham Palace as well, where the King arrived a short time ago. And also lots of people at Windsor, and our correspondent Helena Wilkinson is there with some of them. Helena.
Well, Ben, it's quite extraordinary, really, to see the number of people, and we've been here in Windsor all week, who are coming here to Windsor Castle. We are at the top end of the Long Walk, Cambridge Gate, and this is where really the focus has been for people to come and leave flowers. And today they're coming in big numbers. We've just spoken to an official, actually, who has told us that they are expecting up to 100,000 people to be on this long walk here today. Let's just give you a sense of what we are seeing here around us, and you can see, as I say, not just local people, not just people from the UK, but also we've spoken to people who've come from right across the world, especially to be here for this event on Monday, but also to be here through the week. We know, of course, the funeral is taking place, a state funeral, on Monday, but it is here in Windsor where the state hearse will be brought after the funeral for a committal service in St George's Chapel. Look down the Long Walk, you can see the number of people who are coming up here to the top where we are to lay flowers. And this morning there was a rehearsal because it is about a mile away, which is where on Monday afternoon, just after 3 o'clock, the Queen's state hearse will travel slowly along the Long Walk past tens of thousands of people who will line the Long Walk. And earlier this morning there was a practice with the military, who will be taking part, playing their important role in the procession here on Monday afternoon. They practiced a guard of honour that will escort the outside of the Queen's state hearse. And this morning in the early hours, as that went along, the vehicle went along the Long Walk, the sailors, the army, the military personnel, they bowed their heads as it moved along the long walk here. On Monday, it will go through those gates, Cambridge gates, which will of course be open, and it will pass a carpet of flowers either side. These flowers, and it's been an operation for the staff here, the flowers that have been left outside Cambridge gates throughout the week, staff every evening have been very carefully moving them to the other side of Cambridge Gate and laying them down very carefully. And that is the route which the State Hearse will take on Monday afternoon. Then there will be a committal service in St George's Chapel within the grounds of Windsor Castle. And after that, there will be a private service for members of the royal family when the Queen will be buried alongside her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. But here in Windsor, a huge number of people once again here today wanting to be part of this moment. And I think that we will also see some of these people staying here over the weekend to be here on Monday.
All right, Helena, thank you very much indeed. Let's just show you some pictures we have of the rehearsals for the Queen's state funeral on Monday, and let's just take a look at those now. These are pictures of military representatives practicing, rehearsing outside Windsor Castle. The Queen's coffin, as Helena was just telling us, will be taken there after Monday's funeral at Westminster Abbey. It'll then be laid in the Royal Vault at Windsor beside the Queen's late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, who died in April of last year. Windsor Barracks, the armed forces participating in the procession, have been rehearsing for the first time as one.
Particularly on this occasion, everyone wants to do their level best to give the Queen the most fitting, appropriate send-off that we can. And there's a real vibe round camp at the moment. People really puffing out their chests, wanting to do their level best for the Queen. So for her final send-off, we will be looking our absolute sharpest.
Well, the Metropolitan Police have already said that the Queen's funeral on Monday is going to be its biggest ever operation, the like of which may never be seen again in terms of the sheer scale of that as a policing operation. We're going to talk now to General Sir Richard Barrons, former head of the UK's Joint Forces Command. Thank you very much indeed, and you're going to be reminiscing a little bit about the late Queen with us. And just tell us, as a military man, how important was it for you that the Queen was Commander-in-Chief? In a sense, that was where your loyalty was, she was where your loyalty was, not to the government of the day, not to the Prime Minister, but to the Queen.
Well, that's absolutely the vital point, because as a serving military officer, it's essential that you accept civil control of the military. It's a very bad idea if the military decide on which wars to have, but you want to be above the political day-to-day fray. So the constitutional link between the armed forces and their commander-in-chief, the sovereign, is really important to how the armed forces see themselves as not part of politics and servants of the nation.
We're just seeing some pictures of the Queen unveiling a bust. Now, I think you've got an extraordinary story about this, because it all went a little bit wrong, didn't it?
Well, actually, on the day, it turned out well, but only just. So this was the unveiling of a bust of Her Majesty, who had served as the Captain General of the Honourable Artillery Company, the oldest regiment in the British Army, and she came to visit the regiment at its home in the City of London. And she came to unveil a bust, which at that stage had not been cast in bronze, and it is now, and it's magnificent. And rather unfortunately, in the rehearsal of this unveiling, a little bit of over-exuberance from the soldiers who were removing the cover over the statue, pulled it off the plinth, and it fell on the ground and broke. The artist was on hand, saw this, and then with a lot of help, and worked at great speed to repair it just in time and repaint it and get it back on the plinth. But because we didn't know quite what we were going to see when the cover came off, when Her Majesty removed the cover, I thought it prudent to tell her what had happened and cross every finger and toe that we had. And we were, after all, in front of 1,000 devoted followers of the Honourable Artillery Company. Fortunately, when it was unveiled, it was in one piece, and we got away with it. And the Queen found the whole thing, frankly, hilarious. But because we'd got it right, because we'd fixed it, and I think if we hadn't fixed it, we would have had a dreadful day and all rightly been sacked. But on the day, it worked out.
Your heart must have sunk when you heard that news, though.
Yes. Honestly, I had to have two speeches, one to say, thank you so much for coming to unveil this bust, and the other to say, I'm really sorry that it's broken, because it's clearly not going to come back when we'd fixed it. So I slept well that night.
She was, I gather, an absolute expert in all things military, especially uniform. Is that right?
Yes. To be honest, with the benefit of hindsight, this was a truly terrifying expertise. With the great exception of those bits of the armed forces, like the Army's Household Division and the Colour Squadron in the Royal Air Force, who are very, very professional and always immaculate. If you look at the royal family when they're on parade in military uniform, they are always, without fail, exemplary. Every detail is right, and there's probably quite a bit of help that goes into that. But Her Majesty the Queen really knew military uniforms, frankly, better than the military, and most senior British Army officers are famous for having a slightly casual view on what's right and wrong in uniform. So when lucky enough to be in Her Majesty's presence in a ceremonial uniform, which we wore a whole lot less, frankly, than the royal family, it was absolutely nerve-wracking because, for example, she would know the difference between the width of the red stripe on a senior officer's trousers and a junior officer's trousers, and you would know if you got found out. You wouldn't say anything, but my goodness, you would know.
We've all been reflecting in the last few days on what the Queen and her long reign meant for this country. We've seen this extraordinary outpouring of grief, haven't we? These incredible queues to see the coffin lying in state at Westminster Hall. What are your own personal reflections on her as a Queen and what she meant for this country?
Well, I think it's profoundly important, frankly, to everybody in the armed forces that we recognise that we had the same commander-in-chief for 70 years, and she was the constitutional and ceremonial and official head of the armed forces, and became an institution, and frankly difficult for a while to imagine her not being there. But in fact, the armed forces will understand that their role in national life is to provide a degree of safety and continuity, as it is for the monarch, and so the allegiance transfers instantly and automatically to the new sovereign, and we'll all march on into what looks like quite a difficult world. And the armed forces will reflect that 3 times as many people as are in the armed forces are queuing to have their few moments in front of Her Majesty's coffin. And so it's not just the armed forces that think this is a really important national moment.
General Sir Richard Barrett, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and reflections with us. Thank you very much for your time. Let us just show you some aerial pictures of the queue for Westminster Hall right now, snaking there, you can see, along the River Thames. And we are told now that although the queue was at one stage 25 hours the wait, it has gone down a little bit, well, quite a lot actually. It's gone down to 16 hours, the last we heard from the government website. So it is moving a little bit more quickly, and still people are coming to pay their last respects in Westminster Hall, where the Queen's coffin is lying in state. That's it from Buckingham Palace, where King Charles is now. He arrived here in the last hour to cheers from the crowds here at the Palace, and he is preparing for that reception tomorrow of all the official guests for the Queen's funeral on Monday. Prime Ministers, Presidents, Heads of State will all be here at Buckingham Palace tomorrow for that reception, hosted by King Charles and the Queen Consort and other members, working members of the royal family. But that is it for now from Buckingham Palace. Back to you, Jane, in the studio.
Ben, thank you, Ben Brown, and much more to come from there, of course. But we will also look at some of today's other major stories, and we will start, of course, in Ukraine, because Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says investigations into possible Russian war crimes are continuing in the northeastern city of Izium. Bodies are being exhumed from a mass grave on the edge of the city, which was recently retaken from Russian forces. Ukrainian officials say more than 440 people are buried there and that most of them are civilians who they believe suffered a violent death. Our correspondent Hugo Bachega in the capital Kyiv has more on the war crimes investigation.
Investigators have returned to this forest outside the city of Izum, where this mass burial site has been found. Yesterday, the first bodies were exhumed, and officials say the bodies of civilians have been recovered. Some of them had signs that they had been tortured, and some others were believed to have died as a result of Russian airstrikes and shelling. Officials say that in one of the graves they found the bodies of around 20 Ukrainian soldiers. Last night, President Zelensky said the Russians had repeated in Izum what they had done in Bucha. And I think we all remember the shocking scenes of bodies and mass graves being found in Bucha in the early stages of the war. So a long road ahead for these investigators as they try to identify the victims and establish what has happened in Izum, which was one of the cities under Russian occupation that have been liberated in the northeast of the country as part of this Ukrainian counteroffensive. The Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said the graves found in Izum are proof of horrendous war crimes committed by the Russians and that Ukraine needed more weapons to take back territory and save lives.
Hugo Bachega there in the capital, and the US President Joe Biden has warned Russia not to use chemical or tactical nuclear weapons in the war in Ukraine. Speaking in an interview with CBS News, Mr. Biden said such action would change the face of war, unlike anything seen since World War II.
Don't. It will change the face of war, unlike anything since World War II.
And the consequences of that would be what? What would the U.S. response be?
Do you think I would tell you if I knew exactly what it would be? Of course I'm not going to tell you. It'll be consequential. They'll become more of a pariah in the world than they ever have been, and depending on the extent of what they do will determine what response would occur.
US President Joe Biden on CBS News. At least 10 people have died in Italy after heavy rains and flooding hit the central region of Marche. Search operations are underway for people who are still missing. About 40 centimetres of rain fell in just 3 hours. That is a third of the rainfall usually experienced in a whole year. Here, the police watchdog, the IOPC, says it will investigate whether race was a factor in the fatal shooting of an unarmed black man in South London. Chris Cabba, who was 24, was killed after a police car chase in Streatham earlier this month. The firearms officer who shot him has been suspended from duty. Chris Cabba's family has accused the Met of racism. The White House says it is deeply concerned about the death of a young Iranian woman who died after being arrested by Iran's morality police. President Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, has described the incident as unforgivable. Mahsa Amini, who was 22, died after being detained in Tehran for allegedly violating the Islamic Republic's strict dress code for women. Now, one other story to bring you, because a group of 8 cheetahs has been released into the wild in India 70 years after the world's fastest land animal was declared extinct in the country. The creatures were flown in from Namibia in what officials say is the first time cheetahs have been relocated to a different continent. However, critics of this plan are warning that the animals may struggle to adapt to the Indian habitat.
20 years from now, if tremendous action is taken and there's a lot of habitat available that is free from anthropogenic pressures, from free-ranging dogs, and there is good grassland habitat, cheetah habitat, then you can ask this question. But for now, there's no reason to believe this will work. I mean, there's no scientific backing.
Now we will talk a little bit more about the build-up to the state funeral on Monday. And heads of state and foreign dignitaries from around the world are flying in this weekend, of course, to attend. They will be joined by a cowboy from California. Monty Roberts is famous for his non-violent horse training, a method that impressed the Queen and formed the basis of a decades-long friendship. The BBC's Regan Morris went to meet Monty at his ranch before he left for the UK.
Member of the Victorian Order, a knighthood, a cowboy from California gets a knighthood. Can you believe it? And this was given to me in her office, not outside with the top hat and tails and all that stuff. In her office, very personally. He loves to run like that. Her Majesty's in a meeting in Northern Ireland with the politicians there, and she won't be able to take your call. And I said, oh, well, that's okay. Just tell me when I should call back then. And then I heard, Monty, how are you? Your Majesty. They told me you couldn't take the call. No, she said, they probably told you I was in a meeting with important people, and your calls are more important to me than anything, so I came out of the meeting and took the call. I almost fell off the phone. I couldn't believe it. I've never been received by people like that in my life. There's letters in here and Christmas cards in here. Here's one from the military in England and the Central Intelligence Agency in the United States. The Queen up here with her family and her favorite group of horses, Prince Philip and the Queen here, and letters that were written, and to be sure, with some integrity, because she wrote this letter and she addressed the envelope too. But in order to save a bit of loose change, she wrote on the back of the stationery. I'm sorry for me, I'm sorry for the world, I'm sorry for the family. She was just a wonderful person that just shouldn't have died, ever. I know it has to happen, but I just loved her so much.
Monty Roberts there talking at his ranch in California, one of the thousands of people really perhaps making their way here to the UK now. And the other thing that, of course, we are very much keeping an eye on is the queue. Has capital letters now, doesn't it? We've been looking at the thousands and thousands of people who, of course, have been gathering, snaking their way along the south bank of the Thames to attend the Queen's lying in state at Westminster Hall. Let's cross back to my colleague Karin Giannoni, because she's been there for many hours talking to people who are clearly very hardy and presumably drinking a lot of coffee. Karin, over to you.
Yes, they're grabbing coffee, Jane, where they can get it along the route, and there are places that are open and are catering for all these people that keep coming through. You mentioned the queue with capital letters. This is the snake behind me. It's the phenomenon that people have to encounter just as they think the end is in sight, that Westminster is there. They come through an hour and a half of very condensed queuing back and forth across this Victoria Tower Gardens right next to the Palace of Westminster. And once they've been through that, they then have a few obstacles to overcome. They've got to give up all their food and drink. There are scouts taking it off them and giving it to food banks if it's still sealed, then just putting the rest into rubbish bins. And that's the final straight. They face airport-style security and along the Palace of Westminster, and then round the other side, finally, they get into Westminster Hall. Now, people coming out that we've just been speaking to, coming to the end of their journey, 13 hours, they seem to have joined the queue at about 9 p.m, 10 p.m. last night, and they've walked all night. So we'll try and talk to some people. They're pretty weary, but generally people have been in very good spirits. Hello, we're live on BBC News. Hello, hi. How far have you come today?
Almost from Southend, but we traveled to start 10:30 last night.
10:30 last night, Southend in Essex.
Yeah.
So an hour or so outside London.
Yeah.
We can walk along with you. We don't want you to lose your place in the queue.
Yeah.
And so you've been on your feet for many hours. Did you go to work yesterday, then just come to London?
It's true. We 8 to 4 yesterday, and
Really?
then prepare last night, and we travel from south in here. It takes 1 hour and a half, and then.
How are you feeling now? What's it been like?
I'm feeling this almost near the finish line, so I'm very happy.
Yeah, so there's a feeling that people are quite elated by the time.
Yeah.
Madam, I mean, do you feel much more optimistic now that you've got the end in sight?
It's a blessing. It's a blessing, a great opportunity that we're able to visit
Yeah.
the wake
What,
of the Queen.
what does it mean to you to experience it in real life rather than on TV?
Well, it's overwhelming feeling that we made it, because we haven't got the chance to meet her before, but at this time, at the end, you know, on her burial, we're able to visit.
Yeah, thank you very much, and we hope it is quite an experience for you. Can I talk to you from BBC News? You're live on air. How long have you been in the queue? About 13 or 14 hours?
Yeah, 13 hours now, I think, since about 10:45 last night.
Gosh, so what made you make this journey? How far have you come?
From South Wales.
South Wales?
Yeah.
And the King was in Wales yesterday?
Yes.
Unfortunately, we missed the King.
We were in London.
but we came here to be a part of this.
How's the walk been? Was it? I mean, it was very cold last night for an autumn evening, for a September night.
It was quite cold, and about 4 o'clock our spirits were dipping
I
because
bet.
it was cold and
Quiet
the queue wasn't moving very quick. But then when the sun came up,
It was
everybody
beautiful
seemed
along the front,
lovely, it was
everyone's
beautiful.
mood lifted.
I bet it was.
Fantastic. But overall, the mood, the atmosphere has been just a brilliant experience, really positive and
really well organised.
And so there have been people supporting you all the way along.
All the
You've
way
been able
along.
to have a drink, have a sit down. Toilets as well.
and just generally having a chat with everyone
I bet,
as well.
I bet
It's
you've
been
made
really,
some friends.
Yeah,
Well, we
it's
don't
been
want you to
great.
lose your place. Would you like to talk to us on BBC?
Brilliant.
Come on over here. Hello. Where have you come from today?
I've come from East India.
Really? And what's your name?
Ariana.
Right, so you've come from across the other side of London. And how long have you been waiting?
A long time.
And are your feet aching yet?
Yes, it's been a long journey.
So you queued all through the night?
Yes.
How old are you?
8.
You're 8 years old and you've done this and you really wanted to be here?
Yes.
So what's it been like along the route? I mean, it must have been quite cold and very dark, and walking along, did you ever think, oh, my feet are hurting, this is too much, or have you felt that it will be worth it in the end?
I felt it would be worth it in the end because I'd get to see this amazing experience.
And it's going to be very emotional when you get in there. How do you think it's going to be when you walk into that hall?
Quite amazing, and I just want to be there.
Oh, thank you very much for talking to us, and I hope it's not too long a wait. Thank you, and all the best for the rest of your experience here, Ariana. Thank you. Right, I wonder if we can talk to one more person. Do you want to come and talk to us? Come on over.
Hello.
Hi. Where have you come from today?
From Ukraine.
From Ukraine, wow.
And we love the Queen very much. Yes. And we're here to pay the tribute.
Tell me your names.
Yura.
Camila.
Camila and Yura.
Yeah.
And how old are you?
11.
10.
10 and 11. And how has the night been?
It was cold, but still good.
And you've walked across most of central London and seen all the sights of London all through the night.
Yeah.
You've walked, what must be 13 hours that you've been walking.
Yes.
And this is so important to you to be here. And what do you think it will be like when you see the Queen lying in state?
It would be just like a historical moment.
And do you think that lots of Ukrainians, it's also very important to them too, particularly as so many Ukrainians are in the UK right now?
Yes.
Yeah, and why does it matter to do it in real life rather than just watch this on the TV?
Because you remember it on your own.
Yeah.
And it's a historical moment and you remember it on your own. And
what will you be telling your friends at school? Are you at school here in the UK at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah. What will you be saying to them on Monday morning?
We've seen the Queen's coffin.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And your friends back home in Ukraine?
Yeah.
Well, you're on BBC World News at the moment as well right now, so maybe they're watching you. Whereabouts in Ukraine are you from?
Kyiv.
You're from Kyiv? Lviv.
Yes.
So in the west. And okay, well, we'll let you go because I know your family's waiting for you. Camilla, Yura, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wow, so you can see quite the mix of people coming through from all the different parts of the UK and the world. And the access to the queue, the latest reports on the YouTube page that the government's got up and running is that the queue wait time now, if you're joining the queue now, is about 16 hours. The people here have been waiting 13 or so hours, but joining it now, 16 hours. That is a lot better than it was first thing this morning when the queue wait estimate time was over 24 hours. And the authorities were saying the queue has reached capacity or is near total capacity. Do not travel down to the queue because there is a chance you might not get in, and that would be a problem. But there is going to be a point in the next day or so when those managing the queue are going to have to make the decision to close it in order to enable everybody who is already in the queue to make it through before 6:30 a.m. On Monday morning, before the funeral, when the official lying in state for the Queen ends at that time. So it is going to be quite an anxious journey and an anxious wait for many people, or people on their way to London, to perhaps try to join, whether they will make it through or not, because we're seeing huge numbers of people arriving in London on the morning trains. We shall see. Jane, in the studio, back to you.
Oh, Karen, thank you so much. Karen Giannoni there. Some delightful people we heard from there, and all those school children who'd queued through the night. It was very, very cold overnight. Lovely and sunny now, but was not like that at 2-3 o'clock in the morning. So but lots of people smiling and waving. Remarkable cheerfulness, perhaps, as they think that they're not too far away now from attending the Queen's lying in state. The waiting time currently 16 hours, as we say. We are keeping an eye on that, of course, but also let's turn our attentions to Kenya, because a memorial has taken place in Kenya at a church that the then Princess Elizabeth visited just a matter of days before she became Queen. Because after her visit, just a few days later, her father, King George VI, died and she became Queen. Our Deputy Africa editor, Anne Soy, is outside that church for us this afternoon. Anne, thank you for joining us. Explain what's been happening there today.
Well, we have witnessed this memorial service here, something very special for the people here who live in Naramoru at the foothills of Mount Kenya. It is here, as you say, that the Queen attended her last Sunday service as Princess on the 2nd of February 1952. Unknown to her, while she was just a short distance away at the Treetops Lodge, her father died, and so she became Queen. And therefore, people have come here this morning. The church was filled. They had to get extra seats for people to just come and experience that moment. They feel a special connection to the Queen. And there are memorabilia inside the church that remind them of that connection. Her coat of arms and a piece of the carpet on which she walked down Westminster Abbey during her coronation. We understand that she ordered for it to be cut and sent to this church. So that tells you that it was something special for her as well.
Yes, doesn't it? My goodness. And give us a sense, you talk so beautifully about the connection there. Give us a sense, Anne, of more broadly the extent to which everything we're witnessing here in the UK is being followed in Kenya. I appreciate that it's an enormous generalisation, but what is your sense? What have people been saying about the death of this country's longest reigning monarch?
Well, leaders have paid their tributes. There is a very strong relationship between Kenya and the British government and the British royal family. You will remember, there are many things that have happened here in Kenya. For instance, Prince William coming to propose to his now wife right here in Kenya. And so these special connections have been remembered during this time. But here in central Kenya, people have also been reflecting on that difficult chapter in history. It was around that time in the 50s, going to the 60s, that an uprising was starting, especially here in central Kenya, that led up to independence. And the Queen at that time played an important role in just, through that transition, and people have been appreciating that. Not just here in Kenya. I spoke to the president of Malawi earlier, and he was reflecting on that as well. He said that, thanks to her leadership, they were able to transition fast. She was still head of state for Malawi for 2 years after they got independence, and then to a republic. And even as they embraced becoming republics, these Anglophone countries still, joined the Commonwealth and have remained in the Commonwealth. And therefore, she managed to go through a difficult time in history, but still kept those countries that had a strong historical relationship with Britain together.
And thanks so much, Anne Soy, there for us, following that special service there in Kenya. Well, as the Queen lies in state in Westminster Hall, people who met her during her reign have been reflecting on their interactions with her. It includes, among many others, worshippers from a Hindu temple in Bradford in England, which was opened by the Queen back in 2007. The BBC's South Asia diaspora reporter Gagan Sabharwal has been speaking to people who were there.
This is the Sri Lakshmi Narayan Hindu Temple in Bradford, which is one of the largest temples in the north of England that attracts thousands of worshippers every year. And this £3 million temple is also one of the very few places of worship that was inaugurated by Queen Elizabeth II.
These are the photos which we have taken on 24th of May 2007 when Her Majesty the Queen and Duke of Edinburgh came. Inside there was about 400 to 500 people. Outside there were nearly 1,000 people. This is the worship hall which was inaugurated by Her Majesty the Queen. On that day we created a makeshift temple for the day because we didn't have all these idols there, but the Queen really enjoyed watching all these decorated idols because it was something new for her. But we did explain to Her Majesty, who these deities are, and she was very interested to know all the individual deities which have installed. She was very happy to see them. She was very respectful to all the deities. She stood there, bowed her head, and then she inquired about the significance of the prayer. We found it amazing, I think she got really good knowledge of Hinduism, but still she wanted to explore more, which was really nice, and everybody liked the way she came across. Most of the people had a photograph with Her Majesty the Queen, and they all made the pictures, and they still go in their homes and show people that Her Majesty came here. We saw her, not very big distance, and she stood every few yards to talk to the people. So this cannot be described in words, but it was an amazing experience.
The visit by the late Queen and her husband Prince Philip is something the community here in Bradford say they will never forget.
Special day for my life, and not me only. Every member of our society and Hindu who was here, 300 person, and school children was there, many with the flag, national flag, England. So we feel very proudly. And she was so humble, so nicely speaking.
There are so many people I remember waiting outside because the hall was, we could only accommodate a certain number of people. So people were queuing up outside, they were waiting, with flowers. So we all dressed up in our beautiful clothes. I was wearing my red color sari, my children's all dressed up. All their friends were here, my husband was here. It was an amazing moment for us because we never experienced this before.
Gagan Sabharwal, BBC News, Bradford.
Well, services, remembrances have been taking place up and down the country, of course, ever since the Queen's death was announced. Let's talk to someone who attended a Muslim memorial service just a couple of days ago and was a speaker at that service. Bushra Nazir joins me, one of the first Muslim head teachers in England and also a trustee of Naz Legacy, a charity that helps young people from minority and disadvantaged communities. A very good afternoon to you, very nearly afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us. Explain your involvement and what ceremonies you've been taking part in.
Thank you so much indeed.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure to be invited to be one of the speakers at the Muslim memorial service at the Central Mosque this week. And yeah, it was a pleasure to see so many people, over 200 people attended, majority from Muslim faith, but people from lots of other religions there coming together, one to obviously acknowledge the work of our wonderful Queen, and also about Prince Charles, to give him good wishes for accession to the throne.
And what were the memories in particular of the Queen? What is it that people were saying thank you for, do you feel?
I think what they were saying thank you to her was for her phenomenal service, really, over 70 years on the throne. Her, loyalty and service for all communities is something which is really something that people wanted to celebrate and acknowledge. And the work, she's visited mosques, she's visited temples, has gone to all faith communities. And everybody in the country wanted, to come together to recognise a great monarch and the great service she provided for the whole country. And the Muslim community also wanted to be very much a part of that.
Yes, and we know, we've reflected so much that faith was hugely important to the Queen herself, but her religion was not your religion, but your sense is that she valued religion, is it? And that she respected anybody, whatever their own individual faith?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a multi-faith country now, and it's very important that all the faiths are recognised, and really that we are all together with all our different beliefs, but, for the benefit of the whole country, all the faiths need to be respected, and we all have our duty to respect and support each other's faiths as well. And the Queen certainly did that.
Bushra Nazir, very good to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, as Prince William takes over from his father as the Duke of Cornwall, thousands of people, that means, will be getting a new landlord. Part of the duchy is a town near Newquay, which was developed by King Charles and reflects his well-known concern for the environment. Our correspondent Jenny Kumar has been speaking to people there.
As a prince, King Charles often spoke about the importance of the environment and architectural design. His Majesty's passion for those subjects has been injected into his vision for this new development.
This space here was built for the community as a quiet space.
What's it like living here?
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, there's a really good community spirit here in Nansledden. That was one of the things that King Charles was really keen to build, was this community spirit. And we form a committee to bring people together. We hold events on a regular basis. And, it's all about bringing everybody together.
Walking around, you can see evidence of the King's commitment to the environment. Houses have built-in birds' nests and bee bricks, and fruit trees line the streets.
Here we've got an apple tree. These are all over the estate, where it's all about sustainability, all about wildlife, keeping wildlife within the community so that it's not all gone because we've built houses in this particular area.
We put it on the steam.
For this hat maker, the sustainability vision is a perfect fit with his business. Marcel uses renewable energy and ethical suppliers. He met the King earlier this year.
It was a lovely, lovely experience. He shared a really keen interest in what we do sustainability-wise.
And how are you feeling about the new Duke, a new generation coming?
Again, excited. I think, I don't think much is going to change. Obviously, Prince William is going to carry on the legacy of his father. And I think, again, it'll be nice to have some young blood coming through.
The King wanted to create a vibrant community with homes, shops, offices and green spaces all within walking distance. Around 600 homes have been built since 2014, 30% are affordable. And this bakery was one of the first businesses to open here.
It's a huge project and it's well under the way, so hopefully with the team that they've got, it'll continue in the same vein. I feel like we're in good hands, especially with the new Duke of Cornwall.
And how hopeful are you that the Duke and his family will visit soon?
It'd been fantastic to meet him. Obviously, we've grown up with similar age, but similar age children, and you see their lives like in parallel to ours, and that would be, yeah, it'd be fantastic to meet him. We'd really love that.
So plenty of optimism about the future here, with many feeling that the new Duke of Cornwall, Prince William, together with his father's vision, is a recipe for success. Jenny Kumar, BBC News.
So Jenny Kumar reflecting on the changing of the guard, essentially, in terms of the Duke of Cornwall. And we are, of course, keeping an eye very much as I look down at our various camera angles here, because we know the King has a lot of meetings this afternoon. He was driven into the palace within the last hour. Again, as we've been seeing, there were cheers and applause as he was driven through the gates, and the various camera angles I've been looking at, there's still many thousands of people, it seems, there at the palace, and still certainly people arriving to lay flowers. There's flowers that you can view both in Green Park and in Hyde Park. You might choose to do that rather than spend 16, 17, 18 hours in the queue, but the choice is yours. Currently around about a wait of 16 hours for people just joining the queue there to attend the lying in state. Still a hugely moving experience, as people have been telling us here on BBC News. Keep an eye on that for you. And also we will find out what the weather prospects are, whether you are thinking of joining the queue or whether you are somewhere else entirely in the country today. Let's get all the very latest details from Chris Fawkes.
Hello. Well, it has been a chilly start to the day, cold enough even for a few patches of frost, but otherwise lots of morning sunshine. That's how we started the day in Newcastle, Newry, Morn and Down. However, in Twickenham, one of our early morning weather watchers photographed this steam fog. That's where the warm, moist air from the lake mixes with surrounding cooler air to create this layer of fog just on the water's surface. Now, for most of you, it is going to be dry throughout the day today, but we do have some showers running in across northern Scotland and coming down our North Sea coast. So you could see one or two grazing North Yorkshire, the coastline of East Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, Norfolk and Suffolk, and the showers will continue on and off through the day in northern Scotland. It does turn a little bit cloudier for a time in the early part of the afternoon, but for many, we'll keep those spells of sunshine going all day. Temperatures after that chilly start around 14 to 18 degrees Celsius. And for the Queen's lying in state, it is going to be a dry day today. A bit more cloud, though, to come tomorrow, and there is a small chance of seeing an odd passing shower, particularly late afternoon or early evening time. Now, Saturday evening, Saturday night time, we'll see a few more showers coming and going across Scotland, perhaps a bit more cloud here, a few mist and fog patches, but otherwise clear spells. And another chilly night, temperatures getting into single figures in the towns and cities, but cold in the countryside. Temperatures low single figures to start the day on Sunday, so another chilly start. For many, though, it's another bright day on the cards with further spells of sunshine. A bit more cloud, though, for Scotland and northern England, where there'll be a few showers. And I think there's a greater chance of some showers coming down the North Sea to affect eastern England, so you might see some of those into East Anglia and South East England on and off through the day. Into next week, high pressure continues to affect the weather across England and Wales, but we will have some weather fronts and strengthening winds later in the week across the northwest of the UK. Monday's weather then, again there could be a few morning mist and fog patches. For most of you it's another dry day with some further spells of sunshine, but a bit more cloud around generally, and there's a greater chance of some showers for western Scotland, perhaps running as far south as Cumbria. Temperatures, given the cloudier skies, a little bit higher, 17 or 18 degrees Celsius or so. Still a lot of dry weather to come in the week ahead, but by Thursday as the winds pick up across western areas, we'll start to see some rain arriving as well. Goodbye.
Hello, welcome to BBC News. I'm Ben Brown, live at Buckingham Palace, where mourners are continuing to lay floral tributes for the late Queen Elizabeth. Mourners say they are prepared to wait as long as it takes to see the Queen lying in state at Westminster Hall, amid warnings that the queue times are now at least 16 hours. Rehearsals for the state funeral procession on Monday have been taking place at Windsor. Some of the details were overseen by the late Queen before her death.
And I'm Jane Hill. In the day's other news, investigations are continuing into possible Russian war crimes in the city of Izium. More than 400 bodies are being exhumed from a burial site. As Russia loses ground in Ukraine, US President Biden warns Moscow not to resort to the use of chemical or tactical nuclear weapons. And also this hour, India's Prime Minister releases 8 cheetahs into a national park, 70 years after the world's fastest land animal was declared extinct in the country.
Hello from Buckingham Palace. It's a day of warm September sunshine here, blue skies, bright blue skies, and a perfect time really for large numbers of people to come here to the palace to leave floral tributes for the late Queen. They were rewarded a little bit earlier on today with an appearance as the new King arrived. King Charles arrived at the palace earlier on this morning, and then he's left as well a short time ago. In the last few minutes, King Charles III leaving Buckingham Palace for some engagements. These were the scenes there as the royal motorcade left Buckingham Palace, and there were cheers from the crowds who had gathered here at Buckingham Palace. Well, world leaders are going to begin gathering here in London from today for the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth, which is on Monday. Members of the public still queuing in their thousands to view her coffin in Westminster Hall. Now, the wait was at one stage 25 hours. It's now around 16 hours, according to the government website, though officials are saying that queuing will be paused if it reaches capacity again. But so far, the long wait times haven't deterred people at all. Meanwhile, a man has been arrested after a disturbance in Westminster Hall last night at around 10 o'clock. It's reported he rushed towards the late Queen's coffin before being taken into custody. Well, later on today, the Queen's grandchildren will stand guard around her coffin. Yesterday, the King, the Duke of York, the Princess Royal and the Earl of Wessex held their own vigil in Westminster Hall. Let's get this report now from our correspondent, Dan Johnson.
The sound that signals the change of watch called forward the 4 people who know best the Queen's life and character. Her children, Charles, Anne, Edward and Andrew. All of them in uniform, taking their place in silent vigil, lasting almost 15 minutes.
Surreal, absolutely surreal. Loads of respect, just so glad we waited 12 hours just for that 2-3 minutes. Amazing.
And it wasn't just the Queen's coffin, you got to see...
We did. How humbling is that?
You got to see the whole family. It was incredible, absolutely amazing.
No, it was a very emotional moment, and that just added to the whole afternoon, evening. Unbelievable.
She's the only female we've ever had and will ever have on our planet that is known by everybody in the world, from the smallest island to the largest area on our planet. No, she's just the only one, our Queen. And that to me fills me with, just immense pride.
Meanwhile, the queue kept snaking through the night.
Everybody's remarked on how well organised things have been and what a nice, positive, friendly attitude there is amongst the crowd. The temperature is dropping and the wait times are now up as much as 24 hours, but I don't get the sense anybody is going to be giving up.
The day started with a visit to Wales. the last piece of our national jigsaw for the new King's tour. His first time here as monarch, though as Prince of Wales for so long, he's closely associated with this land and its people. While the majority cheered, there were some jeers. But the King is acutely aware of the distinct identity here, including the Welsh language.
Through all the years of her reign, the land of Wales could not have been closer to my mother's heart. Roedd lle arbennig I Gymru yn uchelon.
The new Prince and Princess of Wales were meeting New Zealand troops and others from the Commonwealth who will be taking part in Monday's state funeral. The military's busy making sure everyone is in step. Around 4,000 armed forces personnel will be involved.
She's been the integral part of the armed forces, the glue between the tri-services, and for me just to pay my one small little bit of respect by doing this duty, I can't measure how prideful I feel about that, and how humbled to have the opportunity to do that.
Last night, a man was arrested in Westminster Hall after a disturbance a couple of hours after the royals left. There are reports he ran forward and touched the Queen's coffin. This has been a place of quiet calm and focused thoughts from so many who've stepped up on behalf of their country in bad times or in good. David Beckham queued for 12 hours and he picked up on the sense of generational change felt by so many here.
I grew up in a family that were all royalists. You know, I think back to my grandparents, because if my grandparents were alive, they would have been here. So it's nice to be here to celebrate with everybody, you know, the life of Her Majesty and the legacy that she's left.
The King's vigil lasted just a few solemn minutes. A new monarch watching over the old, a son's silent tribute. And this evening, the Queen's grandchildren will take their turn here, standing guard in protection and in mourning. Dan Johnson, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, people are continuing to come into Westminster Hall to pay their respects to the Queen lying in state. A little earlier on today, the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, and his wife were among them. Immediately after the state funeral on Monday, he is going to be hosting a reception for guests at nearby Church House as members of the royal family head to Windsor for the Queen's burial. Well, the queue for Westminster Hall, at one stage it was 25 hours, then it was 24 hours, then it was, we were hearing 16 hours. It's actually gone down now to 14 hours, is the very latest we're hearing from the government website, which keeps track of the length of time that people have to wait. There it is, 14 hours, up to 14 hours. So a little bit more manageable. And let's go to my colleague Karen Giannoni, who's in Westminster. The queue time a little bit more manageable, Karen, and also the weather. I know it was very cold overnight, but it's pretty warm now, so at least better conditions for all those who are queuing.
Yes, Ben, the clear skies overnight have meant, although it was really cold overnight, the early hours of the morning were pretty bleak, though people here were doing their best to remain optimistic. It meant today is going to be a really lovely sunny day, and people feel they're very uplifted by the time they get here. We are right in the middle of the phenomenon known as the snake, and I'm sure you've seen shots of it from above, from the side. It's really quite something to be in the midst of. So many people condensed into this part of Westminster, Victoria Tower Gardens, and at this point we're probably about 2/3 of the way through the snake. People who entered the snake entered it an hour ago, so although you're so close to the Palace of Westminster, it's such a long way still to queue, but everybody here said it's the least least of our worries. We've done 13 hours now. That's the figure that these people have been through, 13 hours. They joined the queue at about 11 p.m. And they've also been watching the updates with interest, because hearing that there were 25-hour waits estimated at about 6 o'clock this morning for people joining then must have made them feel that they got the better part of the deal. And that queue wait time now, 14 hours, so things have eased considerably. There were fears that so many people were coming to Southwark Park, 5 miles away from here, that it was going to become unmanageable, the queue was going to be closed. There were warnings, but it hasn't happened. There is still entry to the queue, but at points yesterday, there was a 6+ hour closure of Southwark Park and entrance to the queue. So that is a big risk. If you're taking a journey down to join the queue in the east of London, southeast London, there's always the possibility that the number of people have simply got too much for it. But let's find out the situation there in Southwark Park. Lauren Moss, my colleague, is there. Lauren, how's it looking? Are people still managing to join the queue?
They are indeed. It's very busy. I've been here for about 7 hours now, and it's just got steadily busier with more and more people joining the queue. And in Southwark Park, that's the very back of the queue. It's divided into, I think, 4 zones I can see. This is zone 1, which is very full, and people are now crowding up to fill that zone. When the park gets to capacity, the government website says that the queuing system may pause. And like you said, people that are joining the queue now have been told it could be up to 14 hours before they make their way to where you are at Westminster Hall. So I've been speaking to people here all morning. Some have come with their families, some have come on their own. I met somebody who'd come from Belgium and was very struck by what he described as the Britishness of it all, not just the queuing and the polite queuing system, but the way everyone has pulled together and made friends with each other, sharing snacks, sharing drinks, and sort of good cheer to try and keep everybody's spirits up as they take part in what is at its heart a very sombre event to pay their respects to the Queen lying in state in Westminster Hall. And speaking about new friendships being forged, I'm joined now by Gerald and Sandeep, and you've known each other a grand total of 40 minutes?
About 40 minutes, yes. We met just in the queue, that's it. But we've already exchanged lots of friendship data.
Yes.
Where have you both come from today?
I'll come from Hounslow.
And I'm from Surbiton.
So not too far a trek for you. Some people I spoke to earlier coming down from Yorkshire and Coventry. We've heard from people travelling from other countries as well. But you've brought some flowers with you. And where is it you're hoping to lay those today?
Well, I'm not sure. Wherever I can, closest to the Queen. If I can in the Abbey, then I'll do it there. If not, wherever I can. Wherever my heart sort of says this is the right place, I'll do it there.
And why was it so important to you both to come down here? Similar reasons, or do you both have slightly different personal stories?
I think for me, most of the week really, I've been saying yes, I would love to come, but because I was working, it made it hard. And then the queue seemed so long. But eventually I sort of thought, well, if I don't do it now, I probably won't ever do it. And the Queen was important to me, and it's lovely to come and pay respects to her.
I'm doing it for my parents, my family, and for the people that couldn't be here.
And I can see that this is making you feel quite emotional, and some people I've spoken to have said that similar things to you. They've come here to remember loved ones that are no longer here and would like to have made the trip.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm doing it for everybody, basically. The ones that didn't come here, the ones that couldn't come here, the ones that don't want to come here. I'm doing it for everybody. If you look around, everyone's here. All walks of life, you know. So even the ones that don't want to be here, I'm here for them as well. So technically everybody's here. I'm doing it for everybody.
And you could have a 14-hour wait. It is actually decreasing. It was 24 hours this morning, dropped to 16. Now in the last few minutes down to 14. Are you prepared for when evening comes? Have you got some extra clothes to put on? Any fleeces, jackets?
I've got plenty of thick clothes. I think I'm already probably 2 clothes up, and we'll probably need to strip off before we put clothes on today, with it being sunny.
My wife said to wear more clothes. I said, no, I'm prepared to wait. If there's 24 hours, I'll wait. If it's 48 hours, I'll wait. If there's 2 pauses, I'll wait. I'm here for a purpose. I'm here to stay.
Thank you both very much. I'll let you catch up with your place in the queue. It was a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much. So as you can see, people with very different reasons of why they've come here, but also sharing one very strong reason, and that is to pay their respects to the Queen. The queue moving once again now, and we'll keep you posted throughout the day, Ben.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's just bring you the latest then from Buckingham Palace. We've actually just seen the Prince and Princess of Wales leaving the palace in the last couple of minutes, and earlier we saw King Charles leaving in the last hour or so, getting big cheers from the crowds who are gathered here outside Buckingham Palace in warm September sunshine. It really is a beautiful, perfect day for the crowds who've been coming here to the palace to lay their floral tributes and to get a glimpse of members of the royal family as well. Well, rehearsals have been underway under the cover of night ahead of the Queen's funeral on Monday. These are some pictures we have of military representatives rehearsing outside Windsor Castle. The Queen's coffin will be taken there after the funeral on Monday at Westminster Abbey. It will then be laid in the Royal Vault at Windsor beside the Queen's late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, who died in April of last year. Well, at Windsor Barracks, the armed forces participating in the procession have been rehearsing for the first time as one.
Particularly on this occasion, everyone wants to do their level best to give the Queen the most fitting, appropriate send-off that we can. And there's a real vibe round camp at the moment, people really puffing out their chests, wanting to do their level best for the Queen. So for her final send-off, we will be looking our absolute sharpest.
Let's just bring you up to date with which guests will be at the funeral on Monday. And China, we're hearing, has now decided to send the country's Vice President Wang Qishan to the funeral of Queen Elizabeth on Monday. Now, that decision was made despite what was seen as a snub delivered to a Chinese delegation that wanted to attend the Queen's lying in state in Westminster Hall. They were banned from going because the Chinese government has sanctioned several British members of Parliament over their comments about what's going on in Xinjiang province and the treatment of the Uyghurs in particular. Meanwhile, human rights groups have been criticising the decision to invite to the funeral the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Western intelligence agencies, you may remember, say that in all probability Mohammed bin Salman did order the murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018. Now, that is something that he has always denied, but of course he and his regime have been mired in controversy over that. Well, King Charles is well known as an outspoken advocate for action on climate change. He's seen by many people as a pioneer in his thinking on the environment. That was when he was the Prince of Wales. Now that he is King Charles III, will he be able to express his views on climate change and the environment as freely? Just 5 years ago, King Charles was co-author of a groundbreaking and best-selling book that explained climate change. It was aimed at adult readers. It's the only Ladybird book ever to have been peer-reviewed. And I'm very pleased to say we can speak to one of the two co-authors of King Charles, Professor Emily Shuckburgh, OBE. She is director of Cambridge Zero. That's the University of Cambridge's climate initiative. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. First of all, assess the work for us of King Charles, Prince Charles as he was then, on climate change, on raising awareness about what is happening to our planet.
Well, in many ways, he understood the environmental challenges that the planet's under long before many, many others. It's a topic that he's been talking about since the 1960s, and he's absolutely passionate about. And he, has been one of the greatest advocates, I wouldn't say outspoken advocates, as much as really passionate advocates, for wanting to explain, and that's what we did with the Ladybird book, wanting to explain the risks that the planet is under, the risks that humanity is under from those environmental challenges.
What was it like co-authoring a book with him, with the future king?
It was a kind of humbling experience. He's incredibly knowledgeable about the topic, but in many ways it was exactly the same experience as it is co-authoring an academic work with any of my other colleagues. And that was, it felt very strange in that sense. We went, Tony Juniper, the other co-author, and I exchanged many drafts. It was a real collaboration with the then Prince. And we then went up to Scotland and sat around his desk and went through the drafts line by line. So it was an incredible collaboration, and it was an honour to share that experience and to share his wisdom on the subject.
Now, he said in an interview a few years ago, he's not stupid. He knows that it's a very different role being king from the role of being heir to the throne, of being Prince Charles, and that clearly he won't be able to express his own personal views as forthrightly as he did. Some people have said maybe he would be an activist king, but he's tried to pour cold water on that. What sort of king do you think he will be in terms of his views on climate change, the environment, the future of the planet?
I think the one thing that actually both in his role as the Prince of Wales and now his role as king, the one thing that he can do as a global leader, which he is and has been, is really take that long view that other global leaders are not able to do. He has a duty and indeed a responsibility, I think, and I think he feels this, to warn the world of these sorts of challenges, of the threats to nature and the way in which that impacts global society. And so I think that he will continue to feel that responsibility. But as he described the other day, in terms of his ability to expend as much time and energy, he's looking to others to pick up that mantle. And one imagines not least the new Prince of Wales, who has already started many environmental initiatives of his own, the Earthshot Prize, for example. So I think that it's something that's very dear to Charles's heart, but he has been a genuine leader over so many decades on this topic, and I really hope that that continues.
And whatever he says and does as king, is it your impression that he's always thinking about the world? He is a deep thinker.
He is a deep thinker, and I think that's I think that ties into my earlier comments that he's in a unique position to take a long view and in a unique position to think deeply about these topics which are critical to the future of humanity, and perhaps can take that more deep, considered view than people who are in other global leadership positions who are more tied to short-term politics. So I think it's incredibly valuable that we have a royal family who's able to take that position in global society. And we saw the Queen. This is very much following on from her own legacy. She provided, unfortunately, she wasn't able to go in person because her deteriorating health, but she provided a really critical intervention to the climate conference that happened in Glasgow last year, really trying to inspire the world to global action on climate change. So there's a long tradition of that form of global leadership and the sense of duty and responsibility for leading people through the challenges that we're facing today and we'll face in the future.
Professor Emily Shuckburgh there, OBE, who is Director of Cambridge Zero, the University of Cambridge's Climate Initiative, and co-author of that book on climate change with Prince Charles as he was at the time that was written. Let's get the latest now on the queue, as people, the queue as it is now known, of people who are waiting to see the Queen's coffin in Westminster Hall. The queue at one stage was 25 hours. It is now down to 14 hours, and people are at least enjoying some warm sunshine today. My colleague Karin Giannoni is there for us at Westminster. Karin, just bring us up to date on what's happening with the queue at the moment as people continue to file past the late Queen's coffin.
The queue is still very much a thing with capital letters, the queue, and this is the snake that has become notorious as the bit where the crowd condenses. The wait time looks like it might be quite quick, but people who've come through as far as this point in the snake have been in the snake for about an hour, so it's really concentrated. Maybe another half an hour to get out, and then a few more checks on the other side, half an hour again, and maybe then they're into Westminster Hall. It's much warmer than it was. The blankets that have been given out through the night and through the early hours of the morning, which are really cold, blue blankets we've been seeing everywhere. People are taking them off. People are taking their outer layers off. The people who around me have joined around 11 o'clock last night, so they've been in the queue more than 13 hours. But they were given a boost a little bit earlier when they had none other than King Charles visit the queue at Lambeth Bridge, just about 250 metres away from where we are as the crow flies over that side. Lambeth Bridge is almost the final stage of the queue. I'm not sure if you can see the pictures of his visit. I'm assured that we will get the pictures of his visit to the queue, and he spent a few moments greeting the people who have come to see his late mother lie in state. But it is still such a moment. I mean, I have heard virtually no complaints. One lady who just walked past me, she did say that her legs hurt so much she was losing the will to live, but she is one of the few people still, she's one of the few people who've complained, but still in the overview are feeling very optimistic to be nearing the end of this long night and long day. So many people went to work yesterday, went to school yesterday, and have come to the queue and spent all night, through those dark hours. And very, very cold, temperatures into single figures Celsius, but still the optimistic spirit overall really is such a thing. I asked somebody if their feet hurt, and they said that doesn't matter at all, it's worth it. I think we're going to, before we see those pictures of the very special royal visit to Lambeth Bridge, we'll talk to some of the people who are in this 13-hour queue. Madam, may I talk to you for BBC News? We're live on air. How far have you travelled to be here today?
Okay, from Lewisham.
Lewisham, so southeast London.
Southeast.
And what time did you join the queue?
Midnight.
Midnight. So you're 12 and a half hours nearly into this.
Yeah.
A little way to go, but the end is in sight.
Yeah.
Why was it so special for you to come here today?
Because the Queen is special to me. She had a duty to do, and she did it diligently, patiently, and everyone just loves the Queen.
And it meant so much to you to come here in person rather than to see it on television.
Yes, because I would have regretted it if I didn't come.
We'll walk back actually, because I don't want you to lose your place in the queue after so many hours of walking and waiting. Thank you very much. We wish you all the best. Could I talk to you live on BBC News?
Hi.
How far have you come to be here today?
I came here from Los Angeles.
Los Angeles?
Yes.
So when did you fly here?
2 days ago.
2 days ago?
No, I came here last night. Yesterday morning.
So you you landed at Heathrow Airport yesterday morning,
yes.
Friday morning,
yes.
After a 12-hour flight from LA.
Yes.
And you've come pretty much straight here to join the queue.
Yes, I started around midnight as well.
What made you do it?
I mean, it's the Queen. She's, a legend. She's one of our very few female leaders. So I think it's really important to come here, and it's history.
Yeah.
So.
How long are you going to stay in the UK? So you've really just come specially to do this?
Yes.
When?
So the 20th.
Right, so you're going to spend a few days after the funeral, fly back.
Yes.
And was this something that you saw yourself doing? If this moment came, you wanted to be here?
Yes, absolutely.
And what drives you from all the way across the west coast of the United States to want to do this?
It's history, and it's a really important occasion to be here, and it's the Queen. So
tell me what that flight was like. Were there other people on it?
Very long.
Were they doing the same? Were there others who you talked to who were doing the same, or were you the only person that you knew of?
The only person that I knew that was
coming to London for this.
Me, yes.
Really? But I mean, there must be. I met someone the other day from San Francisco who was in the queue, and he'd just landed and come straight into it. I think it was yesterday morning. I'm losing the track of time. But I mean, and to be walking through there, do you know what you might feel? What it will be like? You've been watching the live shots? Have you?
Yes, absolutely. It's very surreal. I mean, I guess it was coming, but we didn't think it would come so soon. And I've heard about health scares, and I was in shock when it happened. It was like the world. So.
Right, yeah. So the first thing you did, I mean, did you have to stop work or whatever, or you managed to get the time off to come here? We'll walk backwards with you. You must keep going. Don't want to delay you. Thank you very much.
Thanks
so
much.
talking to us. Sir, can I talk to you?
Yes,
You're wearing a very warm hat there. Did you need it overnight?
I did. It was very cold overnight. Not as bad as we thought.
Yes.
It didn't rain, so that was very welcome.
And tell me what the night's like. How far have you travelled to be here, first of all?
Travelled from Tiverton in Devon, so a few hours on the train across London. It was well worth it.
So you're still feeling, after 13 hours standing in the queue, that it's absolutely worth it?
Definitely. And the spirit of the queue's been wonderful. Had lots of support from various different people. We've been sharing food and hand sanitizer and all sorts of items, but mainly a good sense of humour and keeping everyone going, really.
That's wonderful. Now, we can show our viewers the pictures of the King arriving on Lambeth Bridge. You weren't lucky enough to see him arrive.
No, certainly not. I was probably by the golden.
Mother Queen Elizabeth King Charles now meeting some of those who are queuing to see the coffin of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth, in Westminster Hall. And we saw King Charles leave Buckingham Palace within the last hour or so. We weren't entirely sure where he was going, but he wanted to go and greet some of those who've been waiting so patiently for so many hours to see his late mother lying in state in Westminster Hall. And we've seen so many walkabouts really from the new king in the last few days, haven't we? I was here actually at the end of last week when he was here outside Buckingham Palace greeting the crowds of well-wishers for a long time with Camilla the Queen Consort. And here he is again out on the streets, shaking hands, talking to people, and expressing his gratitude, I think, really, that they are part of this huge national outpouring of grief that we have seen in the last few days. Extraordinary lengths of time that people are prepared to queue to get to Westminster Hall to pay their respects to the late Queen. Up to 25 hours at one stage the queue was. It's down quite significantly on that now, down to 14 hours at the last count, we were told, but still a very, very long wait. And people, as we were just hearing there from Karin, who've been queuing in the cold, really cold night, but not put off, not deterred by that at all. And so I think the King just wanted to come and express his gratitude, his thanks to people in person. And really this is a hallmark in the early days of his reign, that he wants to meet as many of his subjects as he can and talk to them. They, of course, express their condolences to him about the death of his late mother. And there is the Prince of Wales as well, who we also saw leaving Buckingham Palace a short time after the King. He's also meeting the crowds there around Lambeth Bridge, all part of the route where people have been queuing and waiting to get that crucial glimpse of the late Queen's coffin, where they can pay their respects. And they have all said what an extraordinary moment it is when they get there, a moment of peace and reflection, hugely sombre, but they are all, everybody we've spoken to who have queued, saying that it was worth it. It was worth the long wait to be there in Westminster Hall, to pay their personal respects. People who don't want to see it on television, don't want to watch it on a laptop, they want to be there in person for this moment of history and to say thank you to a monarch who reigned for 70 years, an extraordinary length of time. Continuity, dedication to service. The King has been wherever King Charles has gone since he came to the throne immediately after the death of his mother. And blue skies there in central London, close to Westminster. Let's have a listen to, if we can, to some of what the King has been saying.
But you want it from here? We have food if you need it.
I called last night. Have you brought snacks for you and food?
Oh yeah, we have, yeah.
You've got everything in your rucksack?
Oh, yes.
You look well dressed for it. Good trainers.
Oh, yes.
Good warm jackets. Well, it means an awful lot you are here, it really does. Thank you so much. Have a good smile. I know, it's amazing the way it really is. The queue goes miles and miles. It's like nothing else.
My condolences. We are really sorry. How long have you got for about 7 hours, 7-8 hours. It's been really worth it. I would have done anything I traveled away from Lincoln to be here. I didn't thought that I would make it, but it's absolutely worth it.
So you got pushed home last night?
Phone down as we come past, please. Okay. Shake hands, enjoy it.
I think we can get too frozen last night.
The King has been shaking countless hands and thanking people who've come to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth. And we heard Prince William just there saying that they had come in trainers, and that was a good footwear for the queue, and also saying how much it meant to the royal family that they had come in such large numbers to say their final farewell to Queen Elizabeth. Let's listen in again as the King and the Prince of Wales continue to meet the crowds here alongside the River Thames.
Watch behind you, Phones down, please, we come past. Enjoy the moment. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, sir. No, sir, 1700. God save the King. God save the King.
You've still got a sense of humour, which is important. But he's smiling. It's very emotional. It's amazing to there.
God bless you.
We had tea and coffee.
Sorry. Phones down, please. Phones down. Enjoy the moment, ladies and gentlemen. It's right happening right here. Sir, phone down, please. We come past. Thank you.
Condolences,
Ladies and gents, phone down. We come past, please. Thank you. Shake hands. Enjoy it. Real life. Phones down as we come past, please. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, the practices of the God of Israel will be on with King Charles. Blessings will be on our praying for you.
Shake hands, enjoy it.
3 cheers for His Majesty!
Phones down as we come past, please. Thank you. Phones down as we come past, please, madam. Phone down. Shake hands, enjoy it, have a conversation.
You just heard there 3 cheers for His Majesty, the crowds cheering the new King as he greets well-wishers, people who have come to pay their last respects to his late mother, but people who are thrilled to be meeting the new King, King Charles III, and also Prince William, who is also there, greeting people, thanking them for their time, thanking them for their patience in queuing up for so long to see the late Queen Elizabeth lying in state in Westminster Hall. There is Prince William talking to the crowds, and it seems that both the King and the Prince have got all the time in the world, really, to talk to as many people as they can. And as I was saying earlier, it really is a hallmark of the King's early stages of the King's reign that he wants to meet as many people as he can. We have seen that in all his trips around the United Kingdom, that desire to get out there and meet people and talk to people and to hear what the Queen meant to them and to hear their good wishes to him. Here is Prince William having a good chat with everybody there.
Very well. Very warm hands. Very well dressed last night.
Thank you for taking time.
We love you, we love you.
Well done with you, sir.
Yes,
Spain. This is it, the international. This cube was the Czech Republic. Where? Czech Republic. Czech Republic, really? Yeah. That's unbelievable. You'd never believe this, honestly. She really would. She would love it. It's amazing. Even in, I say to her, Jeff, she unites it, we'll bring everything together.
I know.
So if we were chatting amongst each other.
We are. Amazing people. Thank you.
Lovely to see you. Thank you. Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you guys.
Phones down, please. We come past. Enjoy the moment.
And the King and the Prince just working the crowds, really, taking as long as it takes, it seems. They're not in any rush at all to end this walkabout. Prince William greeting people, having lots of chats with people, conversations, asking them about how long they've been queuing, what kind of footwear they're wearing, and lots of handshakes. We've heard cheers of long live the King for King Charles as he has been greeting people. We saw King Charles and Prince William leaving Buckingham Palace just behind us where we are in separate vehicles. We saw them heading out. We weren't quite sure where they were going, but then it transpired they were going to meet many of their subjects who've been queuing to see the Queen's coffin in Westminster Hall and devoting huge amounts of time to waiting. That queue up to 25 hours at one stage, down now to 14 hours. But let's listen in then as this very special royal walkabout continues.
God bless the Prince of Wales. Basically, we've been out for 12 hours, and he was just saying
He's very good.
All of us, we love you. Please do, we love you.
God save the King!
God save the King!
God save the King! God save the King! God save the King! God save the King!
All the best.
Yeah, all Hong Kong people give the way very much.
It's lovely to see you.
Yes, thank you very much.
I'm sorry you're still in the queue.
No,
I'm conscious I keep holding the queue up. Making things worse. I'm going fast. Sorry you waited so long.
You're going separately. But you're going separately? Yeah, we are. We're going separately. Yeah. Put the phones down, ladies and gents. We come past. Enjoy the moment. Thank you very much.
People don't care. Love you, Charles. We met before, you know. We did as a competition.
Guys, I need this clear now. Thank you. I need this.
a long way to go. Isn't it? So hopefully you've got lots of people here looking after you. Very nice. We're waving out on the wall. He's got down the end. He's got the fastest hands ever. I'm going to have to go down. Holding out so long as you have. Well done. You're doing all right.
Hi,
Not too cold or too tired? You okay? You're doing amazingly well, you guys. Honestly, amazing. You've got some snacks.
Lots of snacks, lots of sweets, lots of squashes.
You can see him, Lizzie.
Yes.
You're more than halfway.
Yes.
I'm holding you all up, so I'm trying to get spot. We've made it work.
Our condolences, William.
So the King and Prince William with that extraordinary walkabout, really, where they were greeting members of the public who've been queuing for so long to pay their last respects to the late Queen Elizabeth in Westminster Hall. And it's continuing. I must say they're going to be there all day if they continue, but they want to shake as many hands and talk to as many of those people as they can. We were just hearing cheers for the new King. Long live the King was the cheer. And Prince William saying to some of the people there, thanking them for queuing, for taking so long, and they were thanking him for coming to talk to them. And Prince telling them, trying to encourage them actually, that they were more than halfway, but asking them how long they had been queuing, and thanking them for their patience and their fortitude in queuing for so long, a queue that has been at one stage 25 hours. It's now down to 14 hours, a little bit more manageable. And at least the weather, as you can see, is kind at the moment. So the King then leaving in his vehicle. By the way, just while that was going on, Camilla, the Queen Consort, just arrived here at Buckingham Palace, where we are. But Prince William is continuing to talk to people, to express his thanks, to hear their stories about the queue, with a capital Q as it is now known, and how long they've waited, and what it means to them to be here, this moment of history, what it means to them to come to pay their final respects to the late Queen Elizabeth.
Thank you for putting up for as long as you're in the queue. It's amazing. It was so cold last time.
My three grandson saw you yesterday, Sandringham. I live there, so they were so pleased to see you.
So much.
Oh, I know. I even said on Wednesday, perhaps we'll see you at Christmas. Yeah. I've just moved back. Yeah, I just thought, oh no.
We'll see each other again, I'm sure. Yes.
Oh my God, I can
Thank you so much. I hope your toes and fingers are all okay. Whole night last night. Well done, all of Your hands are quite warm, which is good. So maybe you're thawing out from last night. I'm sorry you got so cold last night. I was praying that we're going to have some warm nights to get through. The autumn wouldn't turn up too soon. It's lovely to see you guys. I'm sorry. Give me an idea. halfway. I know, it's amazing. All of you are very well prepared. You tried as well, very good. My father's way quicker at this beat.
Go on.
Oh, very nice to meet you.
You've made me so proud, your man. I don't even know you.
You're very
You're
sweet.
so lovely.
Very sweet. I hope the queue goes fast for you.
It doesn't matter. I'm happy
You're doing
to
an
wait.
amazing job, all of
I'm
you.
happy
It's
to
incredible.
wait. I'm happy to wait. Thank you so much, William. Thank you. Oh, bless you. Thank you so much.
You're very sweet. Thank you so much.
Yeah, where we are now, it was very cold about 4 o'clock this morning.
Especially some things up. How much longer is this? You're doing incredible, all of you. It's amazing.
We'll be thinking about it this afternoon, yes.
We get through Monday. Monday won't be really well done. Speaking doing well. Thank you for coming down here.
Julie, yes, come on. Done it. We've done it. Come on. We did it. We did it.
How are you doing, everyone?
Oh my God.
He's whizzing down.
Lovely, William. It was all right last night. Okay. Cold night. I'm sorry about that.
You don't get taught now, do you?
No, I don't. As long as you're nice and warm.
Yeah, lovely.
You got some nice people around here. You make some friends for life.
Thank you very much for seeing us. You're doing a great job. So thank you lots.
Fantastic job last week.
Good luck with the queue.
Yes. Sorry for you.
It's fine. Mina forskning, så it's fine.
Ania!
Thank you so long. Amazing. All of your stamina is incredible. It really is.
As is yours. Thank you.
Good luck with the queue.
Thank you. We're nearly there.
I'm conscious I'm holding you up.
We're nearly there. We're nearly there.
You're more than halfway now.
We are, yeah.
Thank you very much.
And as you're watching these pictures, King Charles now just arriving back at Buckingham Palace. He was joining Prince William for that walkabout, meeting some of those who've been queuing for Westminster Hall. There's the royal motorcade just snaking its way through the crowds who are here at Buckingham Palace, giving him a big cheer. Queen Consort arrived back here at Buckingham Palace a few minutes ago as well. And that walkabout continuing. Prince William has been telling people that they're amazing, thanking them for their fortitude, thanking them for queuing for so long to see his late grandmother lying in state in Westminster Hall, apologising actually for how cold it was overnight. Not that that's within his power, the weather, but saying he was sorry it had been cold and trying to encourage the crowds, actually, telling them they're more than halfway, offering them encouragement and giving his thanks. And they were thanking him for coming to talk to them, him and King Charles, who've both spent a lot of time today meeting those who are queuing here and waiting for many, many hours. That queue, which was at one stage 25 hours, an incredible length of time that people have been waiting. It's now down to about 14 hours was the last time we had a a figure on it from the government. But it's still a very long wait, however you look at it. And these people, though, don't mind. They're not deterred by the length of the wait. They are determined to come and see for themselves, not to watch on television, to see for themselves the late Queen lying in state.
Dad, I can't talk right now. Yeah, and I've just took cancel with William.
Thank you very much. Got quicker this time. Sped off. Done very well. Hello. You're doing really well. Nice to see you. Well done. Love to see you guys.
Hi, I'm from Peru.
From Peru?
I'm from Peru. Peru. Oh, Paddington.
Amazing. Is he going to go the whole way with you?
Yeah.
It's lovely to see you guys.
Thank you so much.
I hope you don't get too cold in the queue. It's all right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to come out.
Thank you. Bless you.
Well done, you guys did amazing. Thank you so much. It's very kind of you.
They tell you that only is going I don't understand us now. We come all the way. We love you. Thank you.
Very kind. Thank you. Afternoon, guys. You're doing really well. You're more than halfway. I'm conscious that I need to go to let you move. So I'm going as quick as I can. How are you doing? How long have you been in the queue?
For what are you for?
I'm a Villa fan. Are you a Man U fan?
Yeah.
Are you all Man U fans?
Yeah.
Oh, we can't all be perfect. Lovely to see you guys. How are you doing, all right? Well done, all of you. Seriously impressive. 12 hours, sorry, 11 hours? 12 hours. How are the feet?
God bless Wales!
Oh, the Villa! The Villa!
God bless the Prince of Wales!
Oh, a bit cold.
Cold last night. Sorry it was so cold last night. I saw the temperature last night. I was like, really? You could have done with that like next week.
Yes.
Not now. You're all right. Keep your smiling going.
Yeah, just about. Legs are a bit tired.
Thank you so much. You're more than halfway.
I hope so.
You are. William.
Thank you. Sorry for you.
William.
Love your fans, your family, and your little children. And you will stay, because we're North Devon. Yeah, we're the Devon girls. Yeah.
Prince
William of Wales. Oh, good.
I hope the queue speeds up for you.
Oh, yeah. This is cold last night. Prince William.
How you doing?
Yeah, yes, you are.
Thank you so much.
William, you'll make a fantastic king.
Yeah, it will.
Make a fantastic Prince of Wales. Oh, yeah, definitely will.
You okay last night? What's it called? I was worried about the treats you last night.
Well, Prince William continuing this extraordinary walkabout where he meets just some of those who have been queuing for so long to see his late grandmother lying in state in Westminster Hall. He's been talking to children and young people in particular.